Alright, let's see. Got that there. Got that there. Nice, good, good. Everyone knows this is happening right now. Are we live? We're live. This is good. Alright, so, ladies and gentlemen, the origin of this video, this will be uploaded to YouTube, by the way, so, which is also why we're using the World of Warcraft soundtrack, because it will not get flagged for copyright. This is actually quite an impromptu stream. I didn't actually mean to stream today. I meant to make an announcement video on a Q&A session that I was doing. But accidentally I started streaming, and so I figured, well, we may as well keep it rolling with a actual stream of actual substance. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to very briefly go over every unit in the mod, that is both fighter and bomber. Ground units are not yet ready for release, so we're not going to be discussing that. However, most ships are at this point done. So we're going to briefly discuss each of them, and I will go over them and basically go over their strengths and weaknesses per faction. So if that interests you, then well, feel free to stick around. Yeah, it's finally working. So, you making custom voice lines? Nah, not myself. Welcome to the stream, guys. By the way, I said this is rather impromptu. I will close Discord for now. I should actually close all of this. Alright. That music will get me flagged for copyright. It's gonna be a stream worth watching. Definitely. This is gonna be interesting. I don't really... We should close that too. So yeah, do we start with the Empire? Do we start with all of the miscellaneous units? Let's actually start with a few of the neutral ones. Let's see. I'm going to open each ship model so that you have a visual aid of what the hell we are looking at. Let's start with the CIS units, yeah. Alright, so we'll start small. This is the Subjugator. All the Subjugator files. There's quite a few turrets on that thing. It has 146 turrets, so... very basic. The CIS is one of the neutrally buildable... well, it's not a faction in the mod, but its ships are neutrally buildable on several planets. I think there's about, like, 10 or so planets in the mod that can build CIS units. And depending on your starbase level, you'll be able to build their ships. Now, the fighters it has 3 fighters, the CIS. It has the Vulture Droid, the Tri-Fighter, and the... Let's open all of them up, shall we? The Vulture Droid, the Tri-Fighter, and the Heavy Missile Platform. You can't actually build these, but they will be spawned out of the CIS units. Now, starting with the very simple Vulture Droid, it does have glowy eyes, by the way. I really like that. It took me a while to set that one up, but it's pretty nice now that it's actually done. Let's see if we can see that. Yeah, glowy eyes. The Vulture Droid is basically a very, very basic unit. If I recall correctly, it only has 20 HP, which isn't a lot. It's basically a TIE fighter. It's very simple. It's very fragile. It comes in squadrons of 10. It's just your very basic fighter. It's very fragile. It has only 2 laser cannons, I think, hardpoints. It doesn't shoot very fast, but in large numbers it can still be quite effective. This is basically what you're going to be using to hunt most of the fighters that the enemy has. Now, of course, you also have the slightly better interceptor type, which is, of course, the Tri-Fighter. The Tri-Fighter itself is very nice, not only because it has a slightly heavier laser cannon in the front of the ship, but it also has 3 missile launchers. Now, the missile launchers themselves are quite nice simply because the missiles track targets, and it's one of the few units that actually has missiles that it can fire at other fighters and bombers, of course. They don't do a ton of damage. Generally, the Tri-Fighter, by the way, is very small. It's very fragile. If it gets hit, it'll basically die after a few hits. But again, you build it for its firepower, which is basically all of the CIS units. The missiles do shield damage, so they don't penetrate shields, which means that you're not going to be one-shotting, say, TIE Defenders or something with a volley of Tri-Fighter missiles. That was very intentionally done to prevent... Let's see if we can get the fighter stats real quick. Now, these are generally very outdated, but I do somewhat keep them up to date. There's a bunch of fighters missing here, but we'll just roll with it for now. The Tri-Fighter has no shields. It has only a couple of hit points. Yeah, single light laser. Basically, all the TIE fighters have shit for armor. They really don't have a lot of hit points, and they very much rely on either their numbers or if they are shielded, which are only the Phantom, the TIE Hunter, and the TIE Defender. It definitely relies on their shields to keep them alive. Now, of course, anything that launches missiles is going to be naturally very good against these, especially ships like the Defender and the Hunter, which are very expensive, which you really want to protect. And for that very reason, fighter-based missiles, like for example the Tri-Fighter, don't penetrate shields. Alright, so moving on from that, the heavy missile platform, you can't actually see the turrets here, they are detached so they can rotate. But anyway, the heavy missile platform is possibly one of the most powerful units in the mod. Quite simply because it has a ton of laser cannons, both light and heavy, spread across it. It can basically fire in almost all directions, making it very powerful. In a dogfight it's quite useful, simply because it can fire in all directions, while every other ship basically only fires to its front. So this thing can acquire targets to its side and to its rear, while other ships simply can't do that, they need to face their target. Aside from that, the heavy missile platform is armed with I think it launches 4 Tri-Fighter missiles in one go, which it can fire independently from its anti-capital ship armament. So basically you get not only a whole bunch of lasers which can fire in a lot of different directions, you also get basically 2 Tri-Fighters in a single heavy missile platform gunship. Heavy missile platform gunship. I'm not going to keep saying that, I'm just going to keep saying HMP. That in itself makes it very nice, simply because it can fire the missiles and then keep going on its merry way towards a capital ship or frigate or whatever you're attacking with this. Now, aside from the missiles, which are purely anti-fighter missiles do not fire at anything larger than fighters and bombers. I don't think they target corvettes either. So these just fire at fighters and bombers whenever it has a target acquired, which is again nice. It's also armed with, I think it was 16 or 14, something like that, missiles. And with missiles I mean the anti-capital ship variant, which is basically the exact same thing as a proton torpedo in the mod. All fighter-based anti-ship missiles and torpedoes do the same amount of damage. Only since the heavy missile platform fires so many of them, it fires them in a sort of arc around the gunship, so you're never really going to hit all of your missiles, which would be extremely overpowered if it did, because it's a tremendous amount of burst damage in one go. Basically, if you can get this close to a capital ship, it can insta-kill hardpoints. But to prevent that happening from long range, I gave it the fly-out distance for the missiles. So yeah, this thing can target fighters, bombers at the same time. It's very powerful. I don't think it has a lot of HP. I don't even think that it's recorded on the... Nah, it's not recorded in the actual spreadsheet I had going here. So we're just gonna load up the XML file real quick. Heavy missile platform. Right, it has a couple of shields, a little bit. It has a little bit of health, not that much. But the real special thing about the gunship itself is that it only comes with 3 fighters per squadron. Now, there's no other fighter in the mod that actually comes with 3 in a squadron. Basically, I balanced everything in a way that everything spawns with 6 fighters per squadron. Even heavy bombers like the Skip Ray or the B-Wing or the TIE Defender only get 6 fighters per squadron, but the heavy missile platform only gets 3. Now, this wasn't necessarily done for balance reasons. This was done because you only really need 3 heavy missile platform gunships in order to one-shot a hardpoint. So if you have 6 and they get close, they're just going to insta-gib whatever they hit. So you generally want to have that spread across 2 squadrons instead of 1, so that you can then, so that you can target multiple hardpoints. You don't want to waste your firepower like that. So that was very brief. The fighter craft. Now the CIS has a couple of other ships as well. Of course, these are all spawned from the actual CIS ships. The smallest being the Magnificent. The Magnificent is About 800 meters long. It's... Whoa, let's get that out of there. Oh yeah. As you blow up the Munificent, it basically breaks into 100,000 different pieces. So you can't actually look at the entire Munificent because it's broken up into several pieces. The Munificent in the mod is relatively cheap. It's quite large. It's not heavily armored at all. It's very weak. It's got a lot of firepower though. It has a lot of dual turbo lasers right here on the bottom of the ship. Yeah, it's a lot of firepower. It's not a lot of health. You can blow off the shield generator. You can blow off the engines, the 2 ion cannons in the rear, and then the front heavy dual turbo laser, which is one of the very heavy turbo laser projectiles that it fires. All of the other dual turbo lasers are not targetable. The ship only has 4 hard points and it doesn't have a lot of health. It's really one of those ships you want to build a lot of, and then you can overpower the enemy if you just throw them at them. That's basically what the ship is for. That's all it does. Cheap, powerful, but very fragile. That's all there is to this thing. Moving on from that, the Recusant. I think I already talked about the Recusant a bit in that other video I did on the Recusant, but I'll briefly discuss it again. Oh yeah, of course I detached the... when you blow up the Recusant, then you blow off the engine section as well. That's a whole separate thing. Should have the engines right here. Yeah, that's the engine section. I actually have a show variant. Okay, so basically the Recusant is also a relatively simple ship. The Recusant is a very large support capital ship. It's longer than the Providence Destroyer, but it's not nearly worthy of the actual term capital ship. Simply because it doesn't have a lot of HP. Again, there's a lot of exposed superstructure here and it's very skeletal-like appearance. It's got heavy weapons. It has the heavy dual turbo lasers here. It has a couple more turbo lasers spread across the ship. You can blow off the engines, as I said. It also has 4 flak cannons, which it can use for anti-fighter support, and it also has a point defense laser, which has a decent range. Let's see if we can get the ship stats real quick. The Recusant itself, it does have a decent amount of shield points, but it doesn't have a lot of hull points, which means that bombers are very effective against this thing. If you can get past the AA defenses and as well as the point defense laser. Yeah, it's just a great fighter screener. The CIS doesn't have a dedicated corvette, so this is what I figured we would give them as fighter screener. It also kind of sets the CIS apart from other factions, because normally the CIS normally factions have corvettes which they use for fighter screening, but the CIS uses a capital ship for that, right? A little bit unique. Trying to differentiate the factions a little bit in that way. So yeah, that's all there is to this. Relatively low HP. This thing gets absolutely murked by ships like Star Destroyers simply because it can't defend itself against that. It may have a bunch of heavier weapons, but as soon as its shields start going down, then it's just ripped for this ship. Now it can actually stand up to the larger warships, is the Providence Carrier Destroyer. It's called the Carrier Destroyer in canon, I think, simply because it has a very large hangar which can spawn a lot of stuff here, but it's also quite a powerful destroyer. Now in the mod it has a couple of quad turbo lasers, it has a targetable shield generator, no targetable engines. Most ships in the mod don't have targetable engines at all. It has a couple of rapid fire laser cannons which are located along this trench right here. They fire quite quickly, but the projectiles deal less damage. That was basically because I wanted to give it an impressive laser barrage, an impressive broadside laser barrage like you saw in the movie. But to do that I had to reduce the damage per projectile, because otherwise it just did too much damage. And I didn't want the laser batteries to do more damage than the turbo lasers. Another nice thing the ship has are the sideways firing torpedo batteries. It fires a whole bunch of torpedoes in one volley. The torpedoes themselves don't do a lot of damage, but you can still in a couple of volleys take out, for example, a shield generator on a starship. So yeah, there's shield penetrating weapons. It's got a bunch of laser cannons which it can use for both ship combat, but they're decent against fighters as well. They're not the most accurate, but they'll do the trick. And of course it has a bunch of fighters and bombers that it spawns, which are the Vultures, the Tri-Fighters and the heavy missile platforms. Basically this thing is a great yeah, it's just a great addition to the fleet. It was borderline too powerful. It's been nerfed a couple of times, but it's still quite powerful. The Providence has the same amount of shield points as a ISD has. The Imperial Star Destroyer, which is over here. Imperial Star Destroyer 2 has 10,000 shield points, which is a great benchmark for a capital ship shields. It also has 1,000 regular hit points. The Imperial Destroyer, of course, has 20,000, but that ship is supposed to be a floating fortress. This is very much not that, and the Providence is supposed to lose to a Imperial Star Destroyer, logically. ISD-2, that is. ISD-1 it can take in one-on-one combat. Another thing that's nice about the ship is it's mostly broadside, which means that it's got quite a bit of firepower on each side, which means that instead of having, for example, one ship here and then just engaging that, the ship is very well suited to have 2 ships on, or one ship on either side, and then just drive in the middle, and then it can actually bring all of its firepower to bear on its target. Obviously, the guns on this side of the ship can't fire on that side of the ship. So yeah, this is just a great all-around ship to have and to mix into your fleets. Great carrier, great destroyer, just very useful in general. Has a ability that lets it fire its torpedoes rapidly, which is nice for targeting shield generators and such. Overall, great ship. Absolutely love it. Still slightly borderline OP, but it's good enough right now. After the Providence, there's of course the Lucrehulk, which is another... Let me turn off all these explosions. Okay. The Lucrehulk is of course a gargantuan carrier. It's very expensive. It's also very large. It's a 3-kilometer long starship. Other mods size it down and they power it down. I don't do that. The Lucrehulk is the full experience. You get the whole thing. It comes in a carrier variant and it comes in a battleship variant. The battleship variant has, I think, 80% more quad turbo lasers than the carrier variant, which makes it significantly more powerful because it gets like all those extra turbo laser hardpoints that you have to chew through. And the cargo, or the carrier variant, is already very sturdy and durable. The battleship is even more so. Let's see. It is quite slow, but it's still great. It's got 20,000 shield points. The carrier variant has 25,000 hit points, and then the battleship has 30,000. Now, the carrier variant spawns a absolute metric crap ton of fighters. Per wave, it spawns 12 vultures, 4 tri-fighters, and 4 or 8 heavy missile platforms. Here you can see the comparison with the Providence itself. The Providence, by the way, spawns 3 waves of this for a total of this. The Lucrehulk carries 5 waves of this for a total of this, which, as you can see, that is a lot more fighters. It's also significantly more expensive, of course, and it takes a lot longer to make. But it's definitely worth it. Also costs 3 population points, by the way, or 30 population points, so you can only have 3 Lucrehulks on the field at any time. That should be all you need, but you generally don't want to have like 3 Lucrehulks. Mix this in with a fleet of other ships. Definitely don't have just Lucrehulks. By the way, side note on the Lucrehulk, it's a great idea to just sit this ship back. Even though it is very sturdy and it can take a lot of damage, set it back and just send wave after wave of fighters towards the enemy and let your other ships do the fighting. If you really want to send it into the fight, sure, it's very durable, it's got a lot of HP and it's got a lot of shield points. So it can take quite a beating, but I mean, just use the fighter garrison. It's a great fighter garrison. Battleship variant, of course, far more firepower. Also only carries 12 vultures, still has 5 waves of them, so 60 vulture squadrons in total. Doesn't have the interceptors or the heavy missile platforms, but it's still quite useful. Of course, for frontline combat. Battleship variant, of course, you do want to send towards the enemy, because that is logical. Brings us to the CIS super capital ship, that being the Subjugator, of course. The Subjugator in the mod is sized up significantly from what is generally its cannon size. I think it's only supposed to be 4.5 kilometers, maybe 5. In the mod it is about 9 or 10. Why? Simply because I wanted the ion projectiles, which fire from here, to be able to hit multiple ships. I've already done a video on this ship, but I'll go over it very briefly. It's very strong in its front, but overall for what it is, it's actually severely lacking in basically everything. It's got a very decent fighter garrison. It's got a lot of turbo lasers, all turreted, 146 dual turbo lasers and turreted in its front, and it's got a bunch more along its side. Now most of the ship's firepower is concentrated in the front itself. Any ship that gets to its front gets absolutely wrecked by its turbo lasers, but yeah, if you get on its side or even its rear, then you're really going to beat this into a pulp. The reason this is so, I guess, underpowered for its size and costly, the Subjugator, if we go here, it does have 45,000 shield points, which again, it is very powerful. And 75,000 hull points. Again, that seems like a lot, but again, this is a about 10-kilometer long ship, so it better be goddamn worth it. It's also 60 population points, so for that you can have like 6 Providences, 2 Lucrehulks, or a whole fuck ton of Munificence. So again, it better be worth it. Fighter garrison, not that impressive. Not that impressive, especially not considering the population capacity. It also costs 200,000 credits to make, and it costs 10 minutes to produce. That is real life seconds, that is not in-game. So yeah, better be damn worth it. The thing that makes it worth it, however, are the sideways ion cannons. You hit any ship with these, it's a special ability of course, they don't fire on their own. You have to manually target the ship that you want to hit with this. Once you basically hit it with the ion cannons, it's completely disabled. You can use it to disable superstar destroyers and such. Again, this is neutrally built. I mean, I say that, but it might not be neutrally buildable. I may have it locked to just the consortium or the criminal underworld, but that's still in development. It may be neutrally buildable, or it may be just the underworld. We'll see. Anyway, this ship is very good at disabling superstar destroyers if you ever get to them. If you need a counter for superstar destroyers, just disable them with this ship and start pounding away with the turbo lasers. It's not that great in large-scale fleet engagements though, simply because all of these turbo lasers may absolutely wreck single targets. It's not all that great against like 20 Venators all around the ship, then it will get wrecked. So again, this is mostly a utility ship, even though it's got a fuck ton of firepower, HP and a decent garrison. For its population value and for its cost, you definitely want other ships. You don't want this ship. This thing is just to disable either fleets or single targets. And it's really difficult, given the layer Z elevation, to hit multiple smaller ships with these ion cannons. So definitely stick to your single target removal with this ship. Still gonna wreck a lot of fleets, but just again be careful and keep in mind this ship is not a standalone dreadnought. That's basically all of the CIS units. Gone over them quickly. I will read chat real quick. See if people are still... Oh god damn. I was gonna say if people are still interested, but I'll go over chat real quick. How about Hyena Bombers? That's all Clone Wars show content, and I don't like all those children's cartoons or the content that they bring with them. This is a very... The Malevolence itself is a... It's not really the Malevolence, it's just the Subjugator class. It's not the Malevolence specifically, is a exception. Was the Wingfall and the Vulture able to pop? No, it's not. As a big Ra fan, the Beneficence and Beauty to behold. You should see it in one piece, trust me, it's a lot better when it's not blown apart. That's amazing, thank you very much. The Iron Zor. I'm trying to go through chat rather quickly because we've got quite a bit more content to go through, so forgive me if I rush through the chat. Can't wait to see the Venator. Yes, we'll do the Republican Snap next. Broadsiding a Providence with a Venator is going to result in the Providence winning, even without the rapid fire torpedo ability. The Empire in lore, right? No, Venator can't 1v1 a Providence. Maybe if it does it head on, but sideways, absolutely not a chance. The Venator, by the way, if you move it in range, let me real quick bring up the Providence again. Providence class carrier. Okay, so just... God, okay, the new explosions are great, but I didn't take into account that they were going to stack a lot, especially on death clones, so you do get this glowy effect, which I still have to get rid of. Or at least negate. Maybe put some transparency on there or something. I already did that, actually. I already made them twice as transparent, but maybe I need to do that. Anyway, if you approach the Providence from, for example, the front with a Venator, and you can use all of its dual turbo lasers against the ship, well, basically this thing from the front can't do shit. It has a forward-firing ion cannon, but that's about it. So if you can stand there, then you can bomb away, but as soon as this thing turns, then you are going to be under fire. Now, the dumbest thing you can do with the Providence is try to broadside with it, because that's absolutely fucking not what the ship is for. It's got the Star Destroyer configuration of dual turbo lasers, specifically so that it can use them all to the front. If you use, it's like using an ISD broadside. You don't do it. You want to use it in the front, not sideways. This ship, of course, the Providence, you do want to use sideways. So I hope that answers that. The Lucrehulk actually really needs a redo. It was years since I built that ship, man. It's still nice, but it's got some problems. It's got some problems. But I can't just like rebuild entire capital ships. That takes a fuck ton of time. Building models takes a while. Represent firepower. The firepower of Subjugator. Not sure what you mean by that. No more raw OP Lucrehulk. Oh man, these Lucrehulks are OP as fuck. You see a Lucrehulk, then you better have the fleet to engage it, or you run. That's how you do it in Remake. Do the ion cannon shots expand with distance? They do not. Does it affect friendly units? It does not. No, it does not. Eclipse isn't that bad on the fighter spawn. We need Pride of the Core. I'll go with the Superstar Destroyers a little bit later. Pride of the Core. We don't have Mandatory yet. Clone Wars is great. There's a lot of good content. Brit Venator. Delay maybe the explosion a bit. No, that doesn't work. Too much firepower. Already considered that one. To be honest, the Providence is somewhat a carrier. Well, yeah, it does carry a bunch of stuff, but it's also very, very decent destroyer. Very decent. Like definitely the top 20% of ships that you want in the mod. Not just in terms of strength, like straight up the top 20% of all ships, power size, but just power to size ratio. It's great. It's absolutely lovely. I mean, I guess we can pull some of the units. The Dauntless is very specifically Rebel. The Nova Cruiser, yeah, let's hit that in there. The Nova Cruiser is the Japan Battle Cruiser. It's very small. It's just 400 meters. It's got very advanced engines. It's very fast. It can rotate up and down. It can't move up and down, obviously, but it can rotate up and down. It's got a lot of forward-facing firepower. It's got a bunch of ion cannons here on its side. It's got hangars over here, which carry X-Wing squadrons, which are very sturdy fighters, of course. The Japan Nova, yeah, it carries one X-Wing, and it spawns that, it has 2 waves. So you spawn one X-Wing, and then you get another one after that once you lose it. It's quite expensive for its size. It takes a while to build. But again, this is a very advanced ship. It's got a lot of shield points. Yeah, it's got 5,000 shield points, which again is half that of the ISD-2. Which you may think, well, that is very much for a small frigate. Yeah, but that's kind of the way how I raised the floor in terms of shield points and hit points of smaller ships. For example, corvettes have 1,000. A light corvette has 1,000 shields and 1,000 hit points. Heavier corvettes like the Vigil have like a little bit more than that. But in general, to make smaller ships useful, I had to give them more HP, and that is why, for example, a Vigil has 2,000 shield points, which is the Imperial Heavy Corvette. The CR-90, which is the Rebel Blockade Runner, has 1,500 shield points. Nebulon B has 3,000, and from that pours forth the Nova Cruiser, which has 5,000 shield points. Yeah, it has fighters. It's very fast. It's very advanced. It has a bunch of forward-facing turbo lasers, and basically once you get this facing the target, its shields are going to go down very quickly because of all these ion cannons. It doesn't have too many turbo lasers. Generally, firepower-wise, it's definitely concentrated in the ion cannon department. But if you have a couple of these together, they still can do very decent hull damage. But generally use the ship against shields and then target something else which still has shields. If you do leave it targeting hull, again, it's not the end of the world. It's still quite good, and with its X-Wing, it's quite able to defend itself. Has a couple of laser cannons which it can use against fighters and bombers. It's not great at fighter screening, but meh. Generally, all around, very, very nice ship. A little expensive, but very good for what it is. Longhorn. Oh wait, that's not ready to be revealed yet. Okay, Mandalorian units. Genovese. Very small ship. If I recall correctly, it's only like 180 meters long, which really is not a lot. The Genovese, you can't see the turrets here again since they are detached. As with all Mandalorian units, the ship is quite powerful. It has very heavy missiles, which it can obviously fire forward. It's got two heavy... did I make them ion cannons? I believe I made them ion cannons. Whatever. It's got heavy forward-facing ion cannons as well. It's got two dual turbo laser batteries. I think it also has a couple of anti-fighter lasers, but this ship is really not meant... Even though it is a very small, like Corvette-sized ship, this is not meant to do fighter screening. This is meant to engage capital ships in large numbers. And it'll absolutely fuck them up. So if you build a couple of these, please be careful with them. They've got a ton of armor. They've got a ton of shield points. Let's see if we can get them. Yeah. That's not a lot of shield points, you may say, but for its size, it is very significant. It's also got a bunch of shields, hit points. Again, heavy Mandalorian armor. Doesn't spawn any fighters or anything. It's relatively cheap, but it's really a high quality ship for its size. Very powerful, lots of damage output, decent armor, and just very dangerous. Neutrally buildable on Mandalore for any faction that controls the planet. Right, the Kira mod was not done. The Genovese, where is that? Genovese, obviously, great ship as well. The Genovese, by the way, is an Old Republic era unit. The Genovese is as well. Yeah, Genovese you may already be familiar with. It spawns fighters. It has very heavy armor. It fires super heavy concussion missile launchers, the heaviest this game has got, at least the mod has got so far. Yeah, the only way you can make this ship more powerful is if you made it fire diamond boron missiles instead of the super heavy concussion missiles, but really the super heavy conk missiles already do the job of basically taking out anything this is firing at. The ship is 1200 meters long, which is roughly the Venator size. However, if you compare it to the Venator, it does have 10,000 shield points, which again ISD2 level, as well as Providence, Reconnaissance, well, you name it. Venator only has 75,000. I'm just using the Venator as a comparison. Right, fuck ton of armor again. More than the Providence, slightly more than half of the ISD2. Does spawn quite a bit of stuff. I don't think these garrisons are actually up to date. It costs about as much as an ISD2, and it's absolutely worth that cost. The super heavy conk missiles, of course, penetrate shields. They do a crap ton of damage. If you can target the shield generator with this, it'll go down very quickly. It also has two very heavy turbo laser turrets on the side of its head. Those do rotate. They're a little finicky. I'm actually thinking about replacing them. Not the weapons necessarily, but just the turrets. Remove the turrets and put something else there. Simply because I don't like the turrets firing through the head of the ship. Aside from that, it has 3 more turbo laser turrets on its bottom, which are quad turbo lasers, if I recall correctly, and they're also quite powerful. It's got a whole bunch of laser cannons here, which it can use against fighters. Of course, it can use its own fighters against bombers. It can fire its super heavy conk missiles literally all the way around the ship. They will curve out from here, and then they will fire out until about here, and then they will curve towards whatever it was firing at. So this thing can literally fire Add targets in its rear, so no matter where you approach this ship from, you're gonna get smashed. You approach this with bombers, they're very likely to get smashed due to the lasers and the missiles and the fighters. And against capital ships, this is just a fucking beast. Great ship, absolutely love it. Very well worth the cost. Neutrally buildable on Mandalore. That brings us to Nebulon C is not ready. One of the Old Republic units, this is the Centurion Battlecruiser. The Centurion Battlecruiser you've also seen covered in multiple videos already. It does break up in a couple of bits. Again, here are the 3 bits that break off. Those can't be attached in the eweilow viewer, but that's not a problem. This ship is old, it's an Old Republic unit, like the Genovese and the Genovese, only the spiel is this isn't a super heavy Mandalorian warship, this is basically just a, for the time, very nice ship. It's 1200 meters long, again, very nice, but it is, yeah, it does kind of show its age. It does have nice weapons, and it does have the super heavy proton torpedo launchers, which you had to blow up in the Knights of the Old Republic 2 game mission, if you remember that. The ship does have them. Basically, if those connect with any ship, they're going to inflict tremendous splash damage on any hard points in range. And if there's no hard points in range, then it'll just apply the damage straight up to the overall health pool of the ship. So yeah, this is generally very nice to have in anti-capital ship combat, just because of the super heavy proton torpedoes. They're very small, they're unguided. Oh, they're not very small, they're very large actually. They're unguided, and they also don't track targets, which means that once you fired them, you better hope the target doesn't move. Because if you miss that shot, that really is kind of the damper. Let's see, where is that? Centurion. Right, 7,500 shield points, that's not great. 10,000 hit points, that's about the same as the Providence, so that's very decent. Spawns for Sith fighter garrisons. It performs that trick 3 times, so you get 12 in total. Costs 10,000 to build, 50 build time. You can only build this on, I think, Roketa Prime, or Lennon, I think as it's called now, as well as Malachor 5. It's worth building, and it's a nice ship to have. Overall weapons, it does have a couple of miscellaneous ion cannons, turbo lasers, and I think that's it actually for this ship. Yeah, it's got the torpedoes, it's got nice turbo laser armament, and the ion cannons. It's not exceptionally powerful, but the proton torpedoes really are the reason to get this ship, and it does spawn the Sith fighter so you can protect it from bombers. Generally nice. Don't throw it into your fleet randomly if you don't know what the fuck you're doing with it. Unlike, for example, the Providence, which is just great all around, the ship's generally quite specific and you should use it as such. It's not useless. I made very sure that no ships in the mod are useless, but it is very specific. So, buyer beware. What's the interdictor? Right, Sith interdictor. First off, very quick, Sith fighter. This is what the Centurion and the Sith interdictor spawn. They're complete trash. They are very large, they are very fragile, and they have 2 laser cannons, no shielding, no hyperdrive, and almost no value whatsoever. Basically a TIE fighter, only larger and easier to hit. So yeah. But in mass, I mean, a laser shot's a laser shot. So in mass, they're not bad. Sith interdictor. Let's get the engine glows online. Very nice. Sith interdictor is a very nice ship. It is only 600 meters long. It is extremely inaccurate. It's armed with 8 turbo laser batteries. It is armed with 8 turbo laser batteries, right? I'm not fucking that up. 8 turbo laser batteries. It's got a hangar. I don't think the hangar, the gravity well, or the shields are targetable. Can't quite remember, but also doesn't really matter. It's just 600 meters long. It fires a absolute fuck ton of dual turbo laser shots, but it is extremely inaccurate. This ship is not going to be hitting any corvettes or frigates unless you basically park it right next to them. And if you do, prepare to get smashed, because again, this is a very old ship. Very useful for its damage output, and if you're barraging capital ships, it's quite useful. Some of the larger Imperial ships, for example, are very easy to hit. I mean, there's basically no way this ship, even this ship, can miss, for example, a Titan, or the Purifier, or any of the larger Imperial ships. So very useful against them, not very useful against smaller targets. Sith Interdictor, 4,000 shield points, 6,000 HP, which is just the hull. So as you can see, that's not great. Right, it does spawn Sith fighters. It's a lot cheaper than Centurion. You can definitely spam this ship. And basically just have a whole bunch in a line and then just barrage the enemy fleet with turbo laser fire. You can basically, if you have like 5 of these in a row, then you can right click on a clump of fighters and they will very slowly start whittling it down, purely because there's so much laser fire incoming. They're not gonna hit shit, but well, if you have enough of them, then you're gonna get the job done, I guess. Beautiful model, made by Doki, absolutely love it. Love the texture too. It's definitely one of my favorite ships. Neutrally buildable on Malachor 5 and Lennon. Again, not useless, very useful against larger ships, as the Sith ships generally tend to be. But I wanted to illustrate that the ships are generally old from another era, like this Old Republic shit, which is 4,000 years before the movies. And the way I tried to illustrate that is to make, for example, the Centurion relatively light on firepower, except for the missiles, of course, or the torpedoes, and the Interdictor have a lot of turbo laser fire, but have them be very inaccurate. And of course, since at the time all the ships were small, this ship was generally not all that great, even if it did fire a lot of turbo lasers. Now that is made useful in the mod specifically because there are larger ships. Like you do have ships like Mon Calamari cruisers, you have Star Destroyers, you have the larger CIS ships, the Lucrehulk and stuff, and that makes it useful because then the turbo lasers don't really miss as much. So in that way you still get the idea that it's an older ship, it's not great, it's got issues with, for example, targeting, it's not very fast, but it's still made useful in the context of the rest of the mod, which I find very important, that every ship is at least usable, if albeit a little bit specific. Sith Interdictor that's dealt with. Before we head over to the Republic units, I'm gonna switch over to chat real quick again. Where was I? Again, I'm gonna try to go through chat relatively quickly. The dumbest thing you can do is broadside with it. Cough, yeah, basically. No, there's no E-Wings. There's no new Republic units in general, except for the Nebula Star Destroyer, which is Rebel specific. Mon Cal ship. Yeah, we'll get to the Mon Cal ships later. K-Wings are definitely not happening. Even I couldn't balance that. That's got like, it's got fucking missiles, it's got torpedoes, it's got laser cannons, it's got turbo lasers on a fighter which can rotate. My god, the balanced nightmare that ship is, you have no idea. Good god. Never liked Mando ships. Still don't? Okay, well, that's okay. You're gonna see a few of them in the mod and you're gonna hate yourself every time because they are so good. The use on Vong. Vong are still being balanced. No, we are definitely having Vong units. In fact, we've got a whole crap ton of Vong units. Kendoshi for this time looks very modern. Definitely. There's no Raider class. The heaviest corvette the Empire has got is the Vigil, which is very powerful. We'll get to that once we get there. Put in the mass shadow generator. Nah, that's definitely... We don't have super weapons, aside from the Death Star and the Star Dreadnoughts. Centurion is beautiful. It is beautiful. That's one of the few models that I'm really happy with, actually. Spent a lot of time on it, and it's not perfect by any means. It's very light on detail. Please stop showing me this flashy shit. It's gonna happen with every ship, but whatever. One of the models I'm definitely very happy with how it turned out. It's very light on detail. Like, all of this is mostly just completely flat. But in a sense, I think it actually helps the ship look better. the smoothness of it. The texture that you can see here was done by Elrati. Thanks to him for that. Absolutely great work. As usual, Elrati rarely disappoints, if ever. But yeah, definitely one of the models I'm happier with. One of my creations that I'm happier with. Earth Centurion's bridge is really... Yeah, you can see that on top here. Oh, by the way, while we're looking at it, things you will never see in game, but that I put on models anyway, simply because I like the detail. Okay, so to see this, we need to put this down to, say, 5. Maybe... Okay, so if you remember KOTOR 2, you have the large bridge on the Ravager, which you have to walk through, like you take the elevator and then you walk all the way through the bridge area, and then you have an area right here where you fight Darth Nihilus. Basically, that's this. Words are difficult for me today. Basically, that is this area over here. It glows a little in the dark so that you kind of get to see it. If you're not watching for it, you're not gonna see it, which is sad, but it's nice there anyway, just to have it there. A similar thing happens with the Recusant and the Providence and the Munificent bridges. Actually, I don't think the Munificent bridge has it, but whatever. For example, this here is completely glowy, and if you put that down, if we put the ambient light down and we turn that down as well, you can still see that the bridge is glowy, which I think is nice. Right, there's a bit there, then we close this, and then we close that, so that it keeps the settings. Anyway, that was a little bit of detail. Fun to do a all-in-one mod. Nah, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. I do have a Patreon tier for that, by the way, shameless plug. There's a Patreon tier where if we reach that, then I will commit to making the mod a multi-area experience. But that basically takes so much work that I set it up as a Patreon tier. So. And then we'll do Clone Wars and Old Republic and New Republic and shit. And of course the Galactic Civil War. Going stupid? Oh, absolutely. Chat window looks like a hanger. Maybe. Alright, moving on. Republic units. Let's start at the beginning. V-Wing. V-Wing, it's not that great. It's quite small, so it's hard to hit. It's quite fast as well. It basically has the same amount of health as a TIE fighter, but the difference between this ship and the TIE fighter is that this ship has half of it in shields, which regenerate very quickly. Which basically makes this generally more useful than the TIE fighter. It's not buildable, but it does spawn from ships like the Venator and the... it's one of the ships that has a glowing cockpit, by the way. Which is nice. Okay. Yeah, it has laser cannons. It has a single anti-fighter and bomber missile launcher, which is one of the small missiles, if you recall, that do not penetrate shields, that target track fighters and bombers. It doesn't fire at capital ships, but it is nice to have. It only does a little bit of damage. The anti-fighter missiles only do a small bit of damage. But it's a nice little visual touch, right? So yeah, it's got shields, which makes it more useful than the TIE Fighter series, for example, even though it does have the same amount of overall health. It does have the laser cannons, and it has the missile launcher. Generally, nice interceptor, small, hard to hit, quite fast, quite maneuverable as well. In general, just very decent, very decent. Moving on to the far more interesting ARC 170. The ARC 170 is a very nice fighter that I absolutely love. Again, glowy cockpits and shit. I love the ARC 170 for a couple of reasons. A, it fires a regular proton torpedo, so it's technically a bomber. It has two heavy laser cannons on its wingtips. They only fire forward, but they can fire at other ships. Which means you can actually start bombing like larger capital ships with this thing, not only with its torpedoes, but with its heavy laser cannons. And they actually do quite a bit of damage. So, well, individually they don't do a lot of damage. But having a squadron of these and having that consistently fire at your capital ships really becomes a nuisance. And it does turn into a lot of damage once you add it all up. Another reason I absolutely love this is because of the tail guns. It has 2 tail guns which... they don't fire very fast, but they can fire to the rear of the ship, which makes this one of the very few fighters that can actually fire at anything that is not its front. Which, if you recall from the heavy missile platform of the CIS, that is a very special feature that not a lot of ships have. I think it's only this, the Arc 170 and the heavy missile platform, now that I think about it. Maybe mistaken, but I think. So yeah, this makes it very useful in dogfight. Aside from the fact that these laser cannons will basically one-shot any fighter it hits. Not the heavier ships, like for example a Y-Wing. But if you hit a Tri-Fighter or a heavy missile platform or a Vulture, it's gonna just #rip all of them. The rear-firing rear cannons aren't actually that powerful, but again, just because they can fire in any other arc than its front, it makes it very valuable, and it has 2 of them. So again, useful in dogfights, useful in straight up assaults. The Arc 170 has the Lock Asphalt's ability, which can make it go faster. Let's see if I can get the stats up real quick. I'm not even sure if that's in. It is good. I'm not sure if these stats are up to date, but we'll see. 60 health in total, 30 shields, 30 hit points. That's very much stronger than the regular. There's definitely the upper echelons of fighters, so to say, and it's generally just very good. I also just saw that this spreadsheet tells me that the V-Wing has 12 hit points and 12 shields, which I don't think is actually correct. Right, there's no... I should take like the 3 hours or so it takes, or 2 hours, to fill in this spreadsheet again, because it's useful to have like this. This one's kept up to date, but this one isn't, so I generally have in my head how this stuff works, but having it in the spreadsheet is really useful. But when it's outdated like this, it's just... yeah. Anyway, it's sturdy, it's got good shields, it's got good HP for when it loses shields, and it's got a lot of firepower. I just love this thing. It's great. Very, very heavy. It's quite costly as well, but it's absolutely worth the cost. So that for the fighters. Generally, Republic fighters are quite sturdy in general. Okay, so here we come to the what is it? Black Swan, Black Goose, Black something, Black Sheep. I don't like the ship at all. The Dreadnought is truly trash. It's got a couple of turbo lasers. It's got quite a bit of quad laser cannons. Now, don't let that fool you. This ship is not very good against fighters because it's not quite accurate enough to hit them. It's got 1 missile launcher here, which also is not very impressive. It's just... this ship is just not very impressive in general. It's not meant to be, of course. 4,000 shield points, 6,000 HP. It's a little tanky for what it does. It spawns 1 headhunter. Oh, fuck, we've got headhunters. Let me do that first. If I can find them. Fuck it. Okay, the headhunter basically is a... right, I think it is basically a V-Wing clone, except it is... let's see, I hope this is up to date. It's slightly less fast than the V-Wing itself. It is about as maneuverable, which again is definitely upper echelons of agility. Not that fast, but it does have the a single... hang on, I fucked that up. Yeah, the Headhunter is the one with the anti-fighter and bomber missile launcher, but it only has 2 laser cannons. But the V-Wing also has only 2 laser cannons, but it is faster, and yeah, that's about it. They're basically the same, only the Headhunter has the missile launcher, which is nice, but the V-Wing is faster. That's how I differentiated them. Anyway, this thing spawns a single headhunter squadron, so it's kind of nice. It's also kind of really not nice. Dreadnought. Cost 4,000 to build, which means you can really spam this if you want. You're definitely supposed to, because having like 1 or 2 of this thing is really not going to do you much good. This is really a ship that you're going to be using in mass, if you're going to be using it at all. And you really don't want to be building this if you compare it to other Republic ships, because it definitely is the shit stain tier starship. Where's the acclimator? Right here. Okay. Acclimator, on the other hand, quite nice. It's a lot larger, of course. The Dreadnought is 600 meters long. The acclimator is, I think it is 750 meters long. I may be mistaken, but anyway, the way I have the acclimator set up in the mod is it is again neutrally buildable on Republic worlds, which are like, I think there's 15 worlds or so that can build Republic units. It's armed with 2 turbo lasers. It is armed with 2 laser cannons. It is armed with 2 torpedo launchers, which are the heavy torpedo launchers, by the way. The same kind that, for example, the MC-30 carries. This thing doesn't. It only fires 2 torpedoes, a hardpoint, and which makes it not that powerful. But again, it is quite useful for the just the general shield penetration weapons. It also has a single laser cannon. Missile launcher, which is fairly nice. It's basically a jack of all trades, master of none. Laser cannons, torpedoes, missiles, turbo lasers. Not great at any of it, but it does have them. Kind of useful for shield penetration. I think it spawns a single. Yeah, it spawns a single headhunter squadron as well. The acclimator 1 costs about as much as the Dreadnought. Let's see, stat-wise it's basically the same. Acclimator is faster. Interesting, then I wonder what made me decide to... Oh, right, yeah, the Dreadnought has a bit more firepower than the acclimator. But the acclimator does have shield penetrating weapons, so... I suppose that's the difference between these two. Personally, you'll see me build the acclimator a lot more, because I like the versatility of the shield penetrating heavy proton torpedoes. Much more than the extra turbo laser and laser cannon firepower of the Dreadnought. Now, the acclimator for the Empire also has 2 other variants, namely the acclimator 2 and the acclimator 3. These, however, are absolutely worth building. Only the Empire can build them, as I said. Let me get the XML files up real quick, because I have put the differences right there. Acclimator assault ship. Let's see, now I should somewhere here. Right, so that's the acclimator 1. Basically every faction can build this ship. The Empire, however, since of course the Empire likes to keep producing ships, has 2 more variants. Now, the acclimator 2 only varies from the acclimator 1. Yeah, it has 2,000 more shield points, so it has 50% more shields. And it carries a TIE fighter squadron instead of a headhunter squadron. That is a bit of a nerf. However, it does have 3 times the turbo laser damage, which basically means that its turbo lasers are replaced with quad turbo lasers, so single to quad, and they fire slightly slower for a total of 3 times the damage, which is nice for direct turbo laser damage, of course. So you can take out shields with the missiles, and then this time the ship actually has some decent firepower to back that up, so that makes it more useful. Worth building. What's also worth building is the acclimator 3. That has an additional 2,000 shield points for 8,000 in total, so that's double the shield points of the acclimator 1. It carries a TIE bomber squadron instead of a fighter squadron, because this ship is heavily oriented towards heavy assault and heavy capital ship assault as well. So it carries a TIE bomber squadron to aid in that, but what it also has is the missile launcher is replaced by a super heavy torpedo launcher, which is basically what the Centurion fires. It has about a third of the firepower of the Centurion's torpedo damage per volley. So it's not going to single-handedly wreck capital ships, but so you do have in the acclimator 3 you have the 2 heavy torpedo launchers as well as the super heavy torpedo launcher, and that altogether actually makes for a lot of firepower. And of course that's all shield penetrating, and the Acclamator 3 has the turbo laser cannons of the Acclamator 2, so not only do you get the tremendous amount of shield penetrating firepower, you also get the turbo lasers to then actually follow that up with. Now again, the ship still does not have a lot of HP. It does have upgraded shields to give it a little bit more durability, but in general, as the Empire, you can definitely mix in a couple of Acclamator 3s just for anti-capital ship combat, or of course if you want to crack a starbase. So yeah, that was the Acclamator. A lot to say about the Acclamator. You can use that in so many ways. It's quite a nice ship. Okay, the Venator, which is currently the largest Republic unit there is. Right, get rid of that. The Venator is, yeah, it's a nice ship because it's a versatile ship. Again, it's, think Acclamator 1, only a little bit bigger, right? It's got a lot of weapons. It's got a whole bunch of lasers that are not targetable in the trench. It's got very small torpedo or missile launchers in the front, and it's got the dual heavy or the dual turbo lasers. This ship has a lot of stuff, and it's not really great at any of it. Since this is of course a Star Destroyer, it does have the overcharged primary battery ability, which all Star Destroyers have, which definitely make the turbo lasers more useful for a short period of time. It also carries a bunch of fighters, which is really the meat of this ship. If you've watched the ship versus ship videos that I have done on YouTube, you will know that this ship is not meant as a heavy battleship, but it is definitely meant as a carrier with a very decent warship to back it up. It can kind of hold its own against a lot of things, against like small frigates, but this thing is not going to solo a Providence or anything, even with its fighter garrison. However, its fighter garrison is definitely the strong suit, because it carries or it spawns 3 V-Wing squadrons and 2 ARC 170 squadrons, and it can do that 3 times, so you get a total of 9 V-Wing squadrons and 6 ARC 170 squadrons. That is very significant, especially the ARC 170s can do a lot of damage against starships. You can use the Venator, of course, only use that ship to the front. If you broadside with this thing, it's not how you use it. If you want to have this ship only barely in range to fire its turbo lasers, then sure, go ahead and do it. The ship itself does have, let's see, 7,500 shields and 7,500 HP, which isn't a lot, especially for a ship this size. It's 1,200 meters long. 1,200 meters long, which is about the same size as, for example, the Genovese. For its size, it doesn't have a lot of shields and doesn't have a lot of armor, but again, the fighter garrison is what you want to go for with this ship. I mean, that's really all there is to the Venator. It's not a very exciting ship, but it's kind of in how you use it. It can be very effective depending on how you use it, but if you fuck it up, then that's really on you. Now, we do want to have a Mandator 2 in the mod, and we are planning, or I am planning to use the Bellator model to do it, but right now that model is not complete, and the ship is not actually in the mod, so there is no neutrally buildable Republic battlecruiser. So that was that. I'm going to switch over to chat again real quick and get through the questions really quick. Do you plan to change ground battles? Yes, once everything else is done. Beefy Venator. Well, the Venator is in, but it's not beefy, as I just said. V-Wing looks... Thank you very much. I didn't make it, by the way. I only rigged it. Glowy cockpit was mine. But yes, it's very decent. Pages for the ARC 170. Yep, love the ARC 170. Can you see the turrets on the Eclipse? Yeah, it does have 24 octuple turbo laser batteries. Turrets, which are the same as the ISD ones, only of course far longer range. You're really gonna have to zoom in to see them, because the Eclipse is a large. Yeah, V-Wing and shields. Not a lot of them, but it does have shields. Nice. Things harder than me right now. Oh, what can I say, man? I like to make stuff look good. ARC 170s of the US would know about that. Yeah, no, the Arc 170 is just such a solid altogether package. Like when you look at the Venator and you think, oh well, it's jack of all trades, master of none. The Arc 170 is like, I do everything and I do it well. So fuck you. And that's what I love about it. S-foils on the Arc 170 can fold, they cannot on the V-Wing. Trash and block it from... I know, right? You really don't want to be building dreadnoughts. I mean, maybe if you want the extra turbo laser firepower, but... I mean, the Empire can simply build the Acclamator too if you want the extra turbo laser firepower, so... Depending on what you prefer, either more turbo laser and laser cannon firepower or shield penetrating weapons, you can either build the Dreadnought or the Acclamator. No, I'm not. I'm just talking quickly. There's a lot of shit to get through, so I'm kind of trying to talk quickly because there's a lot to go through. What is pretty trash compared to the Headhunter? If you mean the V-Wing, kind of yeah, but the V-Wing is also faster and it's also smaller. Which in this mod, being small as a fighter and being hard to hit is actually a very significant perk. Yeah, the Venator is very powerful. I'm going to be talking about the Venator in a bit. That ship is worth talking about. No. It's not mine to give because it's not my model and my texture. Yeah, Venator does have the spat beam, but it's actually quite powerful. It's also quite long range. That spat beam is actually quite nice. Forgot to mention that. All right. Well, with that out of the way, I think we actually got all the... Oh yeah, the trireme. Guess we'll cover that now. Trireme is one of the corvettes that the criminal underworld can build. The criminal underworld consists of 3 factions. Count them, 1, 2, 3 factions. There is the Hot Cartels, which currently have no ships. They're going to be receiving an entire fleet, including a battlecruiser-sized warship. So that's going to be quite filled out. So there's the Huts. There is the Black Sun. The Trireme is part of the Black Sun units, which are generally... the Hut ships, by the way, are an entire case in themselves. The Hut fleet is going to be basically a whole bunch of very specific ships, which I haven't planned out yet. I will once they're done. The Black Sun basically has a bunch of just general, both trash tier and relatively decent ships, ranging from, for example, the Interceptor 4 to, well, this Trireme. Struggling to come up with a different ship. Hang on. What else do they have? The entire Black Sun fleet's actually yet to be coded in, which is like all of this shit. Crusader, neutrally buildable and yeah, that's actually all there is to the Black Sun. Trireme. Oh yeah. I was talking about factions. The third faction of the criminal underworld is the Zaan Consortium. The Zaan Consortium likes to design starships which basically have a lot of firepower. Say over-engineered ships with a fuck ton of firepower. This is, for example, the Crate Destroyer, which is the Aggressor, I think it's called in game. The Recusant 2, which is basically the Recusant 1, only with Diamond Boron missiles and super heavy mass drivers and a whole bunch of other crazy shit. You'll see once it's released. The Trireme, however, part of the Black Sun faction, it has 6 flak cannons, which are quite nice. They're the same as the Recusant Destroyer's flak cannons, only these are of course mounted on a far smaller and more agile ship. For fighter screen. Not generally laser cannons. Flak cannons are inaccurate. They do a little bit of area damage once they explode, and they basically, well, they just act as flak, like you would expect them to do. Whereas lasers need to hit, flak cannons can just hit in the proximity, and then the area damage will damage the entire squadron. So that's what this ship is nice for, and it sets it apart nicely from other corvettes, because no other ship, aside from the Recusant, has the flak cannons yet. So that's how I try to set that ship apart from the rest. Let's see, do you guys want to hear more about the criminal underworld, the rebellion, or the empire first? Yeah, it pretty much is. Alright, well, in that case, we are going to start with the Rebellion, which has some amazing units. People constantly give the Rebellion shit. Right, this can go. People constantly give the Rebellion shit for being underpowered, but basically they have no idea what they're talking about. And they're high as fuck. Do we just start from the list? Yeah, I guess. Okay, Assault Frigate Mark II. Now this ship is something special. This ship is something special because it has got a fuck ton of armor. It doesn't have a lot of weapons. It has like a couple of missiles, which aren't great. It has like a few miscellaneous turbo lasers and maybe ion cannons, can't recall. But basically you build this ship as for basically one purpose. It is a tank. It is a relatively cheap tank and it can soak up a ton of damage. What you do is also has 14 quad laser cannons, by the way. They're not great against fighters, but they're decent against ships. What you do with this ship is you send it in first against, for example, an Imperial army and just let the Star Destroyers focus this ship, and it really has the armor to tank the damage. The Assault Frigate has a grand total of 10,000 shield points, which for its size is tremendous. It's a lot. And it's also got 15,000 hull points, and that for a grand total of just 6,000 credits. That is very cheap for what it brings to the table. Now again, it doesn't have a lot of firepower, it doesn't spawn any fighters, it's relatively slow, but this thing can tank damage for days. This is the ship that you send in first, and then you send in your faster frigates like the Krillin Heavy Gunship, or the MC-30 behind them, or the new Tide frigate for the Mon Cal fleet. You send that behind this to make hit and run attacks. So this thing can soak damage for days, and you definitely, if you are playing as the Alliance, you should use this ship against the heavier firepower based ships of other factions. Very, very useful. Very cheap, so that you can definitely have enough of a meat shield for your army. Yeah, just not enough good things about this ship. Great ship. Very useful, very useful. So what do we encounter next? Right, the Krillin Heavy Gunship. The Krillin Heavy Gunship has been in the mod for a long time. I've considered removing it a couple of times, and I'm still kind of considering it. But for now, it's still in. It's got a missile jam ability for a relatively small radius around it, which of course makes it very useful against bombers. It's also got a lot of low energy turbo lasers, which basically means that this thing can absolutely shred fighters, not fighters, frigates and corvettes, while against capital ships it really doesn't do a lot of damage. The turbo lasers have a modifier against capital ships to really make sure that this ship is basically one of the heaviest it's not very large, it's one of the heaviest anti-frigate and corvette ships that you can get. It's got a couple of laser cannons that can defend it from, for example, bombers, but with its missile shield, that should definitely be enough to keep it safe. Basically, you set this thing on ships like Gladiators or Victory Star Destroyers or any frigate you can find, and then it'll tear it to shreds. It's also very fast in true old-fashioned Rebellion style. Let's see what else. 5,000 shield points, which is very decent. It doesn't have a lot of hull points, obviously, only 3,000. It's very fast though, agile, costs 5,000, so that's very decent. And again, for its cost and for its size, a lot of firepower. use this to dismantle enemy frigates and corvettes, and it will do marvelously. CR90, this ship really doesn't need much of an explanation. Good against still need to tone down this goddamn engine blow. Good against fighters, very, very fast, actually exceptionally fast, one of the faster ships in the mod. Speed of 5. Very agile as well. It has 2 dual turbo lasers on it, which can help it against larger ships. Obviously, that's just for fire support. This thing is not going to be soloing any larger ships, even in large numbers. So use it for fighter screening and it will be fine. Now, it has a little brother, which is quite dangerous. This is the DP-20, aka the Krillin gunboat. The Krillin gunboat also has a couple of lasers and turbo lasers. Not nearly as many lasers, but it does have a bunch of missile launchers, which can target fighters, and a bunch of torpedo launchers, which it can of course use against larger ships. This thing in large number is extremely annoying, simply because you can make drive-bys. It simply put on its power to engines ability, drive by the Imperial fleet and watch as it cries. Because since corvettes and such have such a high amount of HP in the mod, it's got quite a bit of durability. And given its missile launchers and torpedoes, this thing can just start bombing away. It's just so annoying. They're so fast, so small, so hard to hit with, for example, Imperial turbo lasers, while this just torpedoes and missiles. And, hate it. Hate to go up against it, love to use it. MC-30, one of the smaller ships in the Mon Calamari fleet. Only buildable on Mon Calamari, neutrally buildable, so if you are the Empire and you get control of Mon Calamari, you can build these as well. Very fast ship, heavily shielded, as all Mon Calamari ships are. Relatively weak armor, but it launches... it has 2 heavy proton torpedo missile launchers in its front, which actually fire quite a few torpedoes per volley. This thing can really dismantle capital ships in large numbers. A single MC-30 isn't going to do it, like it could do in vanilla Forces of Corruption, but larger groups of them definitely can. Yeah, 5,000 shield points, 3,000 HP. Again, not very durable, but it's got very, very decent shields. Small build cost, just 4,000, which, if you compare that to, for example, the Nebulon B, it's a very cheap ship. It's very pesky as well. If you get like 3 or 4 of these together and you do drive-bys past the larger and slower Imperial capital ships, then you can really, really start annoying them. Next in line here is the MC-80, but I actually want to move over to the Tide, which is the MC-30 frigate. The Tide frigate is actually a very interesting Mon Calamari frigate. It's about the same size as the MC-30. It is very fast as well. Let's see, that's the MC-30, that's the Tide. It's got a couple more shield points and a little bit more HP. It's also got a hangar. It spawns 2 X-Wing squadrons, just once, so you just get the 2 X-Wings. It is almost twice as expensive, but it's also a little bit more durable. While the MC-30 goes around shield, or tries to deal with shield simply by going around them using torpedoes, the Tide frigate basically has a ton of ion cannon weapons, and heavy ion cannons too. A couple of turbo lasers, but mostly the ion cannons that are important. And it basically tries to drain shields. So both the Mon Calamari frigates, the MC-30 and the Tide, are both anti-shield, but the MC-30 goes around the shields, while the Tide class focuses on taking them down as quickly as possible. Again, it's very fast and it's got a powered engine, so you can get this. You can move this in and then get it out of the way if you need to. It's a little bit larger, but it's still very useful. Also because of its hangar, and again, well, when you are the Rebellion, you do have a bunch of shield penetrating weapons, but getting shields down quickly is useful, for example, for the leading into MC-80, which doesn't have a lot of traditional firepower in, for example, its front, but it does have a ton of weapons all over. There's a whole bunch of turrets that you can't see here. It's got a ton of lasers, it's got a ton of turbo lasers. They're relatively long, low range, But they do fire relatively quickly, but they do have very limited fire arcs. For example, the forward-facing batteries only fire, well, forward, and the rear-facing turbo lasers only fire to the back. Which basically means the ship has a hard time actually concentrating all of its firepower, even though it does have actually quite a bit of firepower. Given all of its laser cannons, this ship is exceptionally well suited to destroy fighter garrisons. If you send a couple of bomber squadrons at this, they might do quite a bit of damage, since the MC-80 doesn't have a lot of armor, but they are going to die fairly quickly. The bombers, that is, because of all of the laser cannons all over the ship. This thing really is a great all-around warship in that it can fire in all directions. It's got a bunch of turbo lasers for anti-fighter or anti-ship combat. It's got a bunch of laser cannons that it can use for fighter screening, and in general it's just extremely annoying to go up against. Mostly because it's got a crap ton of shields. It's got 15,000 shield points, which is 1.5 times as much as the ISD-2. Or 1.5 times as much as, for example, the Providence, and twice as much as the Venator. But it only has 10,000 hull points, which is half of, for example, the ISD-2. It spawns one X-Wing squadron and one Y-Wing squadron, and it has 2 waves, so 2 Y-Wing and 2 X-Wing squadrons in total. Costs 8,000, which is kind of aggressively costed for a ship of this power level. I'm aware of that, but because generally people are too stupid to realize how to use ships, they think that this ship is supposed to be able to take on, for example, an ISD, and then when they very clearly find out that that is not what this ship is meant to do, they cry to me that there is a problem with this starship. So I just resorted to lowering the cost. So yeah, if you want the MC-30, it's very useful for circumventing shields and, for example, going directly for the shield generator. The Tide class directly takes down shields, simply using ion cannons, which you can then use the MC-80 to then move in and then actually start damaging the ship itself with all of its weapons. MC-80, of course, does have a bunch of ion cannons, but cost-wise, the Tide class does it way better. So that's actually it for the engine glows. Really aren't as nice if the particles aren't activated, are they? And then you activate the particles and, well, that's still not great, but spend some time redoing the engine glows. Anyway, yeah, that's the MC-80. Very decent ship. It's actually quite powerful, but you don't want to smash this into, for example, an Imperial Star Destroyer, because that ship, for example, is made purely for ship-to-ship combat. This ship is not. This ship cannot focus all of its firepower to the front. This ship has half of its firepower in laser cannons, which, while it makes it a great fighter screener, doesn't necessarily make it the best in ship-to-ship combat. So keep that in mind. It is versatile. It's got a lot of shields. It's very pesky. It's very powerful, has a power to shields ability, and if used well, it's very powerful, but don't smash it into an Imperial battle line. It's not what it's for, you dumbass motherfuckers. The MC-80 wingless is basically a smaller version of the MC-80. It still has the same garrison. Where are we? We're here. It still has the same garrison, which is nice. It does cost 2,000 credits less, which is quite significant. Has only 2/3 of the total shield points and 75% of the total health, so it's not quite as durable. It also has a lot less weapons, because obviously it doesn't have the wings that it can put the weapons on. But it's still useful. Again, half its firepower is in laser cannon, so it's a relatively useful fighter screener. Yeah, not sure what else to say about the ship. That's it. It's not very exciting, but it is useful. It is useful. Coming up, the Profundity. Okay, the Profundity is a one-time buildable unit, which you can, well, build as the Rebellion, obviously. The Profundity is the MC-30 on steroids. It fires large proton torpedoes. It has the shield strength. It has the shield strength of an MC-30, but it's got the shield penetrating weapons of the MC-30 and then some. So it is really just a nightmare. It has the same garrison as the other Mon Calamari ships, only costs 8,000 to build. It has got absolute trash firepower in anything but its torpedoes. It's got, I think, 2 ion cannons and 2 turbo laser batteries which are targetable, but those are really, really trash. This thing is meant to purely do shield penetrating stuff, and that's about it. You're not going to rely on this ship to actually deal the damage with anything but torpedoes. It does have a bunch of lasers all over, which are useful for fighter screening, but not as useful as, for example, the MC-80. This is really the one hero unit that you can use against larger Imperial ships, just for shield penetrating purposes, and, well, not much else. I mean, that's all there is to it. Big brother of the MC-30, very durable, very annoying, like pretty much the entire Rebel fleet is. It's extremely annoying. Homan doesn't have its new model yet. Oh, the Dauntless. It's just pretty much the entire Rebel roster is just built up of completely bullshit units to go up against. They are so goddamn annoying. Let me see if I can find the Dauntless real quick. Where's the Dauntless? It should be under neutral and then Dauntless. I saw it here earlier. I know it's here. Dauntless, right. Neutral, Dauntless cruiser. Okay, the Dauntless. Okay, so let's set it straight. The Dauntless has 10 quad turbo laser batteries. That's very powerful. The ship has not a lot of shield points, as pretty much none to speak of, 6,000, but it does have the equivalent HP of a Imperial Star Destroyer in terms of hull, which makes it extremely durable. It's very slow, it's relatively slow to turn. Spawns 2 X-Wing squadrons, 2 A-Wing squadrons, and it does that trick twice, so you get 4 in total per. That's purely just for intercepting any bombers that might go near it. This thing has plenty of firepower on its own to deal with capital ships, for example, in all of its turbo lasers. Now you can actually see them. Yeah, here you can see the quad turbo lasers. Yeah, 4 batteries on each side and then 2 more in the front. The ship's a beast. It's a lot of firepower and it's a lot of durability. Now luckily the way this is balanced is that the quad turbo lasers actually have very limited fire arcs. This is the equivalent of like a 17th century like naval ship that needs to get broadside and then just unleashes the most ungodly barrage of turbo lasers known to man. Yeah, this is the ship that I didn't want to give the Rebellion initially, because this can actually take on ships like Imperial Star Destroyers. But okay, the Rebellion now has one. Congratulations, guys. You've been complaining about it for years, and I finally broke. It happened. The Dauntless, it's here. It's neutrally buildable on Solist, though if you are the Rebellion you only need to capture Solist and then you can basically build it everywhere. But it is expensive. It has the price tag equivalent of basically in between the ISD 1 and 2, and it does take a minute to build, so yeah. You want powerful starship, you'll have to pay for a powerful starship. Now the Nebula is actually getting changed. The Nebula Star Destroyer I initially planned to take out entirely, but I changed my mind what we are going to do. Aside from replacing the lights texture, because right now it doesn't have one, as you can see. The Nebula is going to be a one-time buildable unit. Long story short, the ion cannon was too powerful. Same reason that the ion cannon was removed from the ground weapon for the Rebellion and it was changed to a missile. The ion cannon can disable ships no matter what it hits. It basically drains firepower and shields very quickly, and once it's through the shields then it'll hit the hull obviously, and once that happens it drains the firepower of a ship. Now that was meant to counter the larger Imperial ships, like at the time the Allegiance, which was the largest ship in the mod before we started adding stuff like the Purifier and later on the Executor and the Eclipse. But now that we actually have those huge ships, we can't have a single ship like this that can be mass produced disable your Giga ships. That's just not fun. So what we're doing with this, it's just like the Profundity. We are making it a one-time buildable hero unit, which you can still use against large ships, like for example Superstar Destroyers, but I don't want you to spam them. That's why we're making it a one-off hero unit. Yeah, aside from that, it's actually barely changed over time. It's got a lot of shields. It's got a decent amount of HP. Carries one X-Wing, one Y-Wing, one A-Wing, one B-Wing squadron, and it does that 3 times, which is a very powerful fighter garrison. We're also paying out the nose for it, so 15,000 credits. That leaves us with the Starhawk. I also haven't covered the Rebel Starfighters, but we'll do that in a bit. Nebulon B. Now, contrary to popular belief, this ship is not completely useless. The Nebulon B has the very useful ability where it can actually deploy repair droids. These repair droids, or was it the healing pulse? It was either the healing pulse or the goddamn repair droids. The repair droids basically heal ships. You deploy them via an ability, much like buzz droids, only instead of buzz droids, repair bots actually heal hardpoints and ships. The healing pulse, I think, was only for the Quasar, which is the Rebel small carrier unit. The Quasar healing pulse basically heals all fighters in a small radius. Now, hang on while I take a sip of water. Oh, that's good. Okay. Now, it is either the healing pulse or the repair bot, and I want to say it's the repair bot. So you can definitely use the Nebulon B as a heal ship. Aside from that, it has a decent array of laser cannons and turbo lasers, which are actually really not bad. The ship itself is very cheap. It's very small, obviously. It has a relatively large amount of HP. It has 3,000 shields and 2,000 overall HP, which again, since the floor of HP for smaller ships has been raised so much just to balance it, the ship's actually quite durable. And since it's only 300 meters long, and it takes 2 command points, and it only costs 2,500, you can really spam the fuck out of this and just keep swarming Imperial ships with just walls of Nebulons. And while that may seem like a very bad idea, it's actually not that bad of an idea. Oh yeah, repair bots, by the way, very useful, in case you needed a clue on that one. Now, the Quasar, I believe, had the healing pulse. Don't quote me on that, it may have the repair droids, I think it is the healing pulse. Basically, the Quasar is a very small, well, relatively small, carrier unit for the Rebellion that spawns a bunch of stuff. Yeah, 3,000 shield points, 1,500 HP. Very specifically done this way, so that if you actually get some shield penetrating weapons to target the Quasar, it'll go down very fast. Of course, if you look at this thing, it doesn't have the best structural integrity, and it's also not very large. So that's why it has low HP. It does have decent shields to give it survivability against, for example, turbo laser fire. 2 X-Wing, 2 Y-Wing per. It does that 3 times, so 6 in total. Costs 3,000. It's worth building. Not just because of the fighter garrison, but also because of the healing pulse. The healing pulse is very useful, because the Rebellion basically has some of the only starfighters in the game that are worth, well, healing. Why is that? And I'll get to this in a bit. Once I cover the Rebel starfighters, I'll just talk about them in general for a bit. The Rebel starfighters, if you look at the shield and health stats, you will see that they actually have some of the highest values in the entire mod. Not only shields, which now regenerate very quickly in the mod, which makes them actually useful as not just a secondary health pool, but as actual barriers that regenerate quickly, both in combat and outside of combat. They also have a decent amount of armor. Now, the healing pulse doesn't heal shields, I think, but it does repair armor. Now, if you look at, for example, the Y-Wing, which is the tier 1 level bomber of the Rebellion, it has 40 HP, which may not seem like much, but that's actually quite significant, especially if you combine that then with the almost 40 shield points for a total of almost 80 HP. Compare that to the TIE Interceptor of 16 HP. Now, of course, the Y-Wing is a big fat target, which is like 25 meters long and easy to hit, but still. Once you go into these numbers of armor, or for example the B-Wing of 45, you really start noticing why this is worth healing. You're not going to give an Imperial ship a healing pulse for example, TIE fighters. That's complete trash. The moment they're hit, they basically will die. But ships like X-Wings, Y-Wings, and well, I mean not really the A-Wing, but the B-Wing especially, these things can take a punch and they're worth healing, which is why the Quasar has the healing pulse. I'm like 95% sure that the Quasar has the healing pulse. Let me check that real quick. Am I blind? Should I deploy the garrison? Where's the Quasar? Rebel assault frigate. Oh right, Corvette Quasar, which is why I wasn't seeing it. Still blind though. That's the reflector shield. Armor. Right, so this does have the healing pulse. Okay, so again the Quasar has the healing pulse. Useful. For its cost, it's actually worth it, because even though just 4 X-Wing and 4 Y-Wing squadrons are cheaper to build just on their own, they're not faster to build, by the way, but anyway, it is useful to build the carrier specifically because not only do you not lose the starfighters if you do not lose the ship, but 6 X-Wing and 6 Y-Wing squadrons are absolutely more expensive than 1 Quasar. So it is worth getting the Quasar, not just for the healing pulse, but also for the garrison retention as well as the cheaper cost. I think I balanced it so that you only need 2 waves of the Quasar to be cost effective. For example, 4 X-Wing and 4 Y-Wing squadrons would make the Quasar cost effective. So you don't have to use all of the garrison to make it cost effective. But yeah, that's all there is to that. Quasar in general just useful. Oof, Starhawk. This ship is such a problem. Not a problem to face necessarily, even though it is kind of that as well. This ship is a problem to build and to balance. Mostly because its main weapons are missiles and torpedoes, which if you've played the mod, you'll know that they are not very fast. What does that mean? That means that the moment this starts this has so much firepower that the moment this starts firing at, for example, a Star Destroyer hardpoint, it only needs to fire for like 1 second before that hardpoint will be dead. But it takes a lot longer than 1 second for all those projectiles to reach that Star Destroyer. So it's going to be firing for like 1 second and then that hardpoint will be gone due to all these missiles. But it's going to be firing for like 5 or so more seconds at that, which is basically already a dead hardpoint, just for the projectiles to reach that. Which also means that if you get the ship very close to the enemy, it's going to very quickly pretty much wreck everything. A little bit more specific, the Starhawk has 2 regular missile launchers, it's got 2 heavy missile launchers, and it's got a single super heavy proton torpedo launch, which is the same that the Centurion launches. Those are again small. Small? No. Those are again very slow, so be sure to manually target hardpoints when you use this ship. I've looked for ways to try to fix this, but unless I make specific missile projectiles which are faster, I cannot increase the effectiveness of this ship, and I think that I need the slower missiles to make everything else in the mod look bigger by comparison. So yeah, the Starhawk, while it is very powerful, takes a bit of a hit on how effective it is. Now there's quite a bit of hangars all around it, as you can see. The Starhawk does have a very nice garrison. And again, the missiles are actually very powerful, it's just getting them to target hardpoints which aren't already dead, which is the problem. Starhawk, same as the Dauntless, carries 2 X-Wing and 2 A-Wing squadrons, because it is designed so that the ship itself can take care of any capital ships, so you only get a anti-fighter garrison. Right, 3 waves, 6 in total, it's quite expensive. It's also quite costly in terms of population cost. But yeah, that's it for the Starhawk. It has 4 laser cannons around its rear so that it can defend itself. But generally, this ship does need to face its enemy for you to really make use of the lasers or the missiles. Not really sure what else to say about the Starhawk. I think we're done there. Moving on. Alright, now luckily the Rebellion only has like 4 actual dedicated fighters, so this is going to go fairly quickly. The A-Wing is very small. Again, it's hard to hit, which is very important in this mod because we don't have like gargantuan collision boxes. The A-Wing has 2 laser cannons which can fire in a unusually high arc up and down, vertically. Horizontally not very, but they're supposed to swindle up and down, so that's why it has a high vertical rotation fire arc. It also has 2 anti-fighter missile launchers, which I thought was just a nice visual thing. Again, the missiles are actually quite nice, and since it launches 2, it's actually quite effective as well, especially for this ship. It's very fast, it's very light though. If this gets hit by a missile, you are going to lose it. It only has 14 hit points, which isn't a lot. It does have good shields, and since shields are now the more active defense barrier for fighters, that's definitely the more important part. It's one of the faster ships in the mod. Speed of 4.8 I think is still relevant. Tri-fighter, by the way, I didn't mention it, but it's definitely one of the absolute fastest interceptors in the mod. A-Wing though, very useful. It has the it has the laser cannons, it has the missiles, it's fast, it's agile, it's hard to hit, it's everything you want in an interceptor. Has a lure ability which decreases the damage that it takes by like 50%, so if you're dogfighting with this, use the lure ability and you will get a straight buff. Very useful. I actually want to lead that into the X-Wing and not the B-Wing. And the X-Wing is quite a lot larger. It's also more difficult to bring down because it does have a little bit more armor. It should be the same level of shields. Yep, same level of shields, a little bit more armor. It's a lot slower, obviously. It does have a single small proton torpedo which it fires, which isn't as powerful as a bomber torpedo, by the way. It only does like, what is it, like 1/6 of the damage or so. It's really more for show. I mean, it still can target capital ships and such, but you're not going to be taking down a Star Destroyer with these proton torpedoes. 4 laser cannons. Lock as foils ability. That's all there's to it. Very sturdy starfighter. And with the mini proton torpedo, it is versatile. Leading then to the Y-Wing, which is very slow, and it is very large, which makes it very easy to hit. But as I've already talked about, it does have the armor and the shields to actually tank the damage. It has a dual laser cannon in the front, it has a dual ion cannon on top, and it has a normal torpedo launcher, which is the same that all bombers fire basically. It only fires 1, so it's not like B-Wing, which fires 2 torpedoes. Let's see, yeah, it is very slow, it really does not turn very fast. It may actually be the slowest turning thing, with the exception of the skip ray. Here it says the skip ray turns faster, but I don't believe that. One of the slowest turning ships in the mod. It's one of the larger, also one of the largest starfighters in the mod, so definitely be careful there. But again, it does have the extreme durability, especially for a ship of this cost. It has a lot of HP so that you can actually take the damage. Single torpedo, bomber, yeah, ion cannons, laser cannons. This thing can take TIE fighters in a head-on engagement simply because it only takes like 2 shots of the dual laser cannon to take out a TIE fighter, and this thing has so much HP that it really just doesn't give a shit. TIE interceptors, that's a different story, but yeah, this thing is just very sturdy and very useful. Just don't go dogfighting around with it. Head-on engagement with like TIEs, that's okay, but don't try to do anything more fancy than that. That leads us into the B-Wing, which I really like. The B-Wing also has 2 ion cannons, but unlike the Y-Wing, which its dual ion cannons fire very slowly, the B-Wing ion cannons fire normally. So you get the full amount of ion firepower. It's got one heavy laser cannon and it's got one light laser cannon. The heavy laser cannon does a lot more damage than the regular laser cannon. It fires 2 proton torpedoes, which generally makes for a very useful bomber because you not only have the ion cannons and the heavy laser cannon, but you also have the 2 torpedoes. Lock S files makes it faster. Basically everything you already know and love about the B-Wing. It is very large. The B-Wing is a very large fighter, so it is very easy to hit. Which also, luckily, since it is so large, it has plenty of space for plenty of armor and a very powerful shield generator for its size. 50 shields, just like all the other top tier bombers. The Skip Ray, 50 shields. The TIE Defender, 50 shields. But it also has the 45 armor. Yeah, pretty slow. Slow to turn, slightly faster than the Y-Wing it says here. I can't believe that. That's still up to date. Doesn't cost nearly as much as, for example, a TIE Defender. But it is still very powerful. 2 torpedoes per shot. Ion cannons, la-di-la-di-la-da. We already talked about it. Yeah, just very, in general, very useful shit. All of the Rebel fighters are fucking nuts. They are so powerful. They are absolutely crazy. It does on this list say the Headhunter, but the Headhunter is now limited to just Republic neutrally buildable units, so there is that. Alright, so I fear that there is a fuck ton of chat that I have missed, so I will try to cover it best I can. Again, I will go for this through this as fast as I can, and then I will move on to the Imperial units. How to use Rebel units. I'm going to very clearly and very accurately state in the description exactly what a unit does and how you're supposed to use it. For example, the assault frigate is going to have in very big fucking letters tank or something like that. Just so people know what it is. Because like I can sit here and say, yeah, I know exactly how this ship works because I coded it and I built it and I know everything about it. But someone who just sees that ship, no fucking clue. So that's why I really want to be transparent about how that shit works and just how you should be using it. So you don't get a situation where someone throws an MC-80 into an ISD-2 and then comes back complaining that, oh my god, my MC cruiser got fucked. Your balance sucks, right? I want to really prevent that. So yeah, I like Rebel design surprisingly. Yeah, I mean basically the entire Rebel roster is fucked. It's so good. Like they're very specific ships. Like they're not jack of all trades. Like maybe the MC-80 is, but for example, like like the Tide frigate, great against shields. MC-30, great against shield penetrating stuff. Quasar heals fighters. Assault frigate, only useful as a tank, but very good at it. Like half the Rebel roster is very, very specific, and it's amazing at what it does, but you need to know what it does first. And I found that a lot of people have issues with that. Right, Millennium Falcon is one of the hero units. It's got like lasers, missiles, a couple more shit. It's got a plot armor ability which makes it invulnerable, which has lovingly been renamed plot armor. Dipshit 20. Gonna remember that, that's funny. No, the MC-80 really isn't all that special. It's got a fuck ton of shields, it's got a ton of lasers to protect itself against fighters, but it's really the basic bitch starship of your Rebel fleet. It's not meant to do something very specific and very well. You've got all the small frigates of the Rebellion to do all the specific stuff. Alright, you want to see the home one? I'll load up home one real quick. It's ready to be imported and rigged, but I simply haven't gone there yet. 3S Max always takes a bit to start up. Okay. Home one incoming. Should still have it here. Right. Which one's the proper one? I mean, there's been... There's a few files. Continue. And I want some goddamn new music, because I've been listening to this for a long time. And I love the World of Warcraft soundtrack. It's great, but by God, I could use something else after like an hour. Epic music, good music. Epic music is instrumental. Alright, Elder Scrolls soundtrack. Go. This is a bunch of lighting of the old thing. What's this? That's also the old thing. Okay, so it's this one. Right. Okay, so this is the new home one. Let me put that into perspective. This is going to be the new home one model. It's got like hangers. It's very detailed. I like it. I had to strip away a lot of fucking detail. And it's still detailed as... Yeah. And this is the reduced version. It's like nice hangers and shit. It's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely beautiful. I didn't make this model, by the way. This is courtesy of... Good lord, What do I say his name? I got it through a guy. So I know the first guy who gifted it to me. But I forgot the name of the guy who he got it from, who then got it from the actual artist. And I'm terribly sorry, and once the image of the ship is uploaded, of course, I will properly credit and I will go after that. But for now, just know that this isn't mine. This is not my creation. It is absolutely lovely detail, by the way. Yeah, you'd think it's quite high poly, and it is quite high poly, but it's not actually unacceptably high poly, which is great. 50k, that is a lot, but I can strip away more. And get it down. I still need to do that. Again, the ship is simply not ready yet. But it's beautiful. By the way, this ship was like 200,000 polys. I already stripped away of an absolute metric shit ton of detail. So yeah, this is to be the new like 2.5 kilometer home one model. So that's the home one. If you mean that small raider corvette of the Empire, then no, that ship is not in the mod. The entire Imperial ship roster at this point is completely filled. I can't find any new uses for any new ships. And I don't like adding shit just to add shit. I absolutely hate that. I worked very hard to give all these ships that you see in this list a very unique weapon layout, a unique purpose, something that they do very specifically, and give them all a unique role and make that role make sense within the context of the fleet. Like, if you look at just the CIS fleet, each of these ships has a very specific function they serve. They're useful in their own right. And within this fleet, if you construct a fleet of just these units, you can make this work. This is a functional fleet. Much like if you take the Rebel roster, you can build a functional fleet out of this. And all these ships are unique and have their own character, so to say. Both in terms of how their HP is laid out, how their weapons is laid out, and everything together makes for a unique ship roster. And even the Imperial roster is that. And I worked very hard to make it like that. And when I have to stuff in, when I have to artificially add new ships, or when people want me to do so, like for example the Vindicator, a lot of people wanted me to add the Vindicator, I cannot find a unique purpose for the Vindicator. Simply because every role, from like mainline warship to specific small dedicated carrier, which is the Gladiator, to powerful for its size warship meant purely for one-to-one ship combat, which is the Pro Crusader. Jack of all trades, Victory. Very small, very powerful, specific special forces unit escort carrier. Can't find any more uses. And trust me, I've thought about this shit a lot. Sometimes people come to me and say, oh, well, you could just add this and this and just make it that. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can do that, but in the context of everything else, that doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, of course it would work, but it doesn't follow the same design philosophy of the mod, and I try very, very hard to preserve that in everything that I do. No, there is no Raider, there's no Eisen Versio. Will ships that don't have visible turrets get updated? Absolutely not. Over time, I've grown more and more away from moving turrets, not only because they are slightly janky, but because, and I will give you an example, in a ship where it's done well. And then I will give you an example of a ship where it's done not well, which is still causing problems. This is a ship where it is done well. This is the Allegiant Star Destroyer, which we'll get to in a bit. Hang on while I get rid of all the explosions. Okay. This ship has 32 small turrets. These very small turrets on these mounts, there are 32 of them, 16 on each side on the superstructure. These are turreted. These are not targetable. These are not very powerful weapons. This ship has other weapons, of which consists most of its firepower, which is, for example, the 6 on each side quad turbo lasers, the quad ion cannons here, the single ion cannons here, which are 3 on each side here, which makes 6. So 3 singles, 6 quads, and 12 quad turbo lasers. I believe those are all the targetable weapons of the Allegiant side, for example, shields. And that constitutes the bulk of its firepower. That is done well. These are all turreted, but they're all reasonably destroyable, and even though the number of hardpoints on the ship is high, the ship itself is large, so it makes sense to have a large number of hardpoints, and you do not feel like that impedes destroying the ship. Like, you know what I said about the Starhawk with firing at dead hardpoints? Now imagine if all these 32 smaller weapons were all targetable. You would have 32 more hardpoints which you need to destroy, and even if you give them just like 10 health, which means they die from a single projectile, it still means that projectile has to travel from ship to ship and then hit hardpoint, and then everything fired after that one shot, which is still firing in between the time it takes from weapon to reach weapon. Everything in between that are dead projectiles. Those projectiles may hit the ship, but they do no damage because the hardpoint's already destroyed. This means that when working with turrets, you cannot have too many targetable turrets. Here it is done well. These extra turrets, they're miscellaneous, they're not targetable, and they do not constitute the bulk of the firepower. Now here's an example of a ship that it's not done properly. I still regret this. The Subjugator gets away with it simply because it's Mega Dreadnought. It's a battlecruiser sized ship. This is the Lucrehulk that we have talked about. The Lucrehulk's firepower consists of, and I do think it is 20. You know what? Let me bring up the code real quick, and I'll tell you exactly what the problem is with the turrets and why I no longer like them as much as I used to. That's hard points. Where are you? Lucrehulk. 34. The Lucrehulk has a targetable shield generator. It has 16 targetable laser cannons, and it has 34 targetable turrets. Now that's great, except that the 34 targetable quad turbo laser turrets it has are very low health, which means that exactly the problem that I talked about with the Starhawk is a very large problem with the Lucrehulk. It has so many hard points that are not all necessarily high health, but there are a lot of them, that artificially it extends the lifespan of a ship. So that even though you have, for example, a Executor class firing at this, because it only fires at one hard point at the time, it's still going to take like 2 minutes to chew through the entire ship, because it has to target each individual hard points. And you have this massive barrage of, for example, just imagine the Executor, a massive barrage of turbo laser fire hitting the ship, but because it's targeting this like one turbo laser turret, after the first like 0.1 second that the ship fires, that hardpoint would be gone. It's dead. But because the game doesn't realize this, it keeps firing until all of those projectiles have hit that one turbo laser turret, and then it moves on to the next. And it does that 34 times. Then you look at the battleship, and then you realize that you simply almost double the amount of turbo laser turrets, and now it's 62. So now it is 62 plus 16 plus shield. Do you see the problem? This is why turrets in general are not great, and it's not just because they can like fire through the ship sometimes, and because the fire arcs are janky, but it's because to do them well, you can only have like a few turrets which constitute the bulk of the firepower of the ship, or you can have like as many turrets as you want, as long as they are not a significant part of the firepower of the ship. And because of this, turrets in general just are really janky. Okay, I hope that explained it. It looks nice, definitely. It's Farseer's model. He did a wonderful job of that. He made all the Rebel starfighters. Bye bye guys, thanks for hanging out on the stream. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. How are you doing with the Star Defender? I'll load that up, but that actually takes a while to load, so we'll do that build stream another time. Yeah, definitely, the home one is great. It's amazing. I also really like the MC85 as well. Yeah, I like the reddish ship design. Greetings. Alright, so we have had the Rebel fleet. We have had pretty much all the neutrally buildable units. Let's see, we've had all this. Most of this. We've had all of this. Okay, on to the Imperial roster. Now, the Imperials used to be the guys that actually got most of the toys, but if you look at the list, then you can see that there's actually a lot of ships in general at this point. So let's just go with what we find. Do we go with what we find first? I really think we should do this from top to bottom. So let's start with the weakest thing we have, the Customs Corvette. The Imperial Customs Corvette is very, very basic, right? It has a couple of laser cannons, it is not particularly strong, it has relatively weak armor. It's a Customs Corvette. You're not supposed to throw it into battle, but if you have a couple of them, they can still kind of effectively fight or screen. There's really nothing remarkable about this thing. Moving on to the far heavier Vigil Corvette, which, yep, is over here. Again, you can't see the turrets over here, but that doesn't really matter. It's got quite a bit of laser cannons, almost twice as much off the top of my head as the Customs Corvette. It also has 3 dual turbo lasers, turbo laser turrets, which do move. It's got twice as much shield points, it's got 1.5 times as much health, and it spawns a TIE Scout Squadron, which, well, you can use for scouting, and it has the ping ability. The ping ability has been heavily buffed, by the way. It's actually useful now. So yeah, it comes with a TIE Squadron. It's 250 meters long, which is very large for a Corvette size. But it's also very powerful. It's also very fast. It can chase down, at least it should be fast. Yeah, 4 speed. So it can chase down enemy Corvettes. Oh, and it also has 2 missile launchers here. It's just an overall very heavy and nice Corvette. Moving on from that, the broadside. The broadside. Oh, I didn't cover the Marauder either, did I? No, I didn't. Since they're both both basically the same ship. I'll cover them both at once, I guess. The broadside is one of the few ships in the mod which has the very expensive diamond boron missiles. Now the diamond boron missiles have literally since the start of the mod been nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, and I'm finally at the point where I think that they may be balanced enough. They no longer one-shot 3 to 8 fighter squadrons in a single blast. They only kill a maximum of, I think it was 12 fighters in a single missile. Even though this thing does fire 3 per, it does have a fairly lengthy reload. It has very long range, it's a very useful siege platform, but in general, this thing is just absolutely wonderful against fighters. You can use it against other targets as well, though. The diamond boron missiles have the highest blast radius as well as the highest damage of any missile in the mod. So if you want to use this to bomb capital ships, go right ahead. But in general, you're going to need quite a few of these to take down capital ships, simply because, well, I mean, the missiles may be exceptionally powerful, but it's just, you do need a few of them to chew through a capital ship, so. Useful against groups of frigates, though. If you can hit a couple of clumped up groups of frigates with this, then it's just rip. As with the Marauder, the broadside is, it does have decent shields, it has low armor itself, it has no other weapons, it's very slow. Again, it has no other weapons simply because, well, the diamond boron missiles are so expensive that you really don't want to waste any cost on the ship by giving it like some random turbo lasers that are never going to be used anyway. Very expensive, 5,000 for this ship is the cost that you are paying for the diamond boron missiles. Same for the Marauder cruiser. Leading into the Imperial escort carrier. Again, you can't see the turrets here, but it does have several. The Imperial escort carrier has 2 long-range heavy turbo lasers. It spawns several TIE hunters, which are very useful as well. Yeah, it's very small, it's very fast, it's very agile, and it costs a lot of cash. Not only because the TIE hunters themselves are very good, but this ship is really an artillery platform. The lasers are very long range and you can just sit back and bomb away. Oh, and because it's so small, it's also hard to hit, and it's got a very decent amount of shields and armor for its size. Well, not armor, but shields are very nice. Moving on to the Gladiator. The Gladiator is the first Star Destroyer that you can really build. Where are we? Right, G. Oh, okay. The Gladiator is the dedicated carrier variant. By the way, you're never going to see the ships like this. This is like 50 ambient light. This doesn't happen in the mod anywhere. Normally it's like that. So people complaining about it is too dark. This is what you'd normally see in game, only with a little bit more generous light angles, perhaps like this. But for demonstration purposes, I have kept the ambient light to 50, simply because it creates a very nice, bright environment to show ships off. Anyway, as you can see, the ship is covered in hangars. It's the dedicated carrier thing. It's only 500 meters long, making it the smallest Star Destroyer you can build. It has 3,500 shields, which isn't a lot, 4,000 armor, which for its size is decent. It spawns per wave 3 TIE fighter squadrons and 1 TIE bomber squadron. And then you may wonder, but if this is the dedicated carrier, then why the hell does it only spawn that? Well, I'll tell you, simply, this ship is relatively small. It does have 3 waves of them, so you are talking 9 TIE fighters and 3 TIE bomber squadrons in total, but it's also cheap. The Empire doesn't have a dedicated large carrier, at least unless you consider the Executor a carrier, but that's not really how that works. The Gladiator is designed, it was useless. If you remember in Vanilla Empire at War, the Acclamator, it was completely pointless. This is basically the Gladiator. It has it has 2 laser cannons, it has 2 turbo lasers, and 2 small missile launchers. Negligible weapons, but the way I made it useful is this is basically the ship that you can most cost effectively spawn fighters out of, and also it has a low enough population cost that you can really get a lot of these on the field if you really want a fighter oriented strategy for the Empire. Because as much as they like to rely on a lot of fighter spam, their ships don't really spam a lot of fighters, so you're gonna have to bring in some gladiators if you really want all those TIE reinforcements. And due to their low cost and their low population value, you can really smash in a lot of gladiators. Just be sure to keep this ship away from the front lines, because while it does have a couple of weapons here and there, it's not something you want to be throwing into the thick of the fighting. Again, just sit this ship back and let your other Star Destroyers move in. It may have the tag Star Destroyer, but that is purely in name. Oh, yeah. The dedicated carrier of the Empire. Very small, relatively cheap, spams a lot of shit. Moving on to... The Vindicator isn't actually in the mod. Victory, however, is. The Victory used to have moving wings, which I had to take out because the ability was buggy as fuck. Which I still regret to this day. But that's just something I have to live with. So yeah, no moving wings. The Victory is the general purpose warship of the Empire. It not only has the heavy sideways firing concussion missiles that we've all grown to love in the Remake mod, but it also has 2 other missile launchers which are target tracking. The sideways firing ones do not target track, but the smaller but target tracking missiles don't fire at an arc and they are longer range, which means that you can actually use the Victory as a somewhat longer range missile platform, so to say. They don't do a ton of damage, but it is very consistent and it just keeps on firing missiles at long range due to these 2 missile launchers here. The sideways firing missile launchers are not targetable. Sadly, that's not possible with the way the ship is set up. That's simply not doable code-wise. Otherwise, they wouldn't be curving, and I have been reluctant to give up the awesome curving missile, so that's not happening. The long-range missiles, however, are targetable, and those are also useful for light fighter screening. You're not going to be strafing off any heavy bomber attacks with these missiles, but like single squadrons, they can be useful with. Other than that, it is basically the vanilla Empire at War setup for the Victory. It has a single ion cannon, and it has 2 turbo laser batteries. It also has a shield generator, of course, and it spawns a few TIEs. TIE fighters, this doesn't use TIE interceptors. 2 TIE fighters and 1 TIE bomber per wave, and it has 3 waves. Still a bit less than the Gladiator. It also costs 6,000 resources, which, as you can see, you may think, well, if I want a couple of fighters, why don't I just buy myself a Victory instead of a Gladiator? Because that is just more useful. It also comes with a frigate that you can actually use for stuff, like you've got missiles and this like nice little ion cannon and a couple of turbolasers. Why would you not build this? Well, relatively simple. It costs quite a bit more. The population cost is not a very significant difference, but in general, just the build costs and the fact that it takes like twice as long to build means that you can really easily spam gladiators, which are just useful, instead of the Victories. And I think that is enough of a difference, at least from the way I've tested. That's enough of a difference to make the Gladiator stand out from the Victory and to make it useful. Yeah, 4,000 versus 6,000 cost. You get less fighters with the Victory, but you do get the missile platform, which it is. Now moving on to the Pro Crusader, I've covered the difference between the Pro Crusader and the Victory quite a bit. The Pro Crusader is very much the one-on-one ship combat frigate for the Empire. It is larger than the Victory. Where is it? Right here. Okay. Basically, the Pro Crusader has a lot more durability and it's got a lot more ship-to-ship firepower. It doesn't have any missiles, but it does have 8 quad turbo lasers. It does have... how many sideways turbo lasers does it have again? Hang on a second. Wait, I can just check that here. Right, it has these... You can't see them here, of course, because turrets are detached. It has 8 quad turbo laser turrets. It has 3 quite heavy triple turbo lasers. These are long-range rapid-fire ones. These are quite dangerous. And it has 2 ion cannons in the trench and 2 turbo laser batteries also in the trench behind it. Trenched weapons on Star Destroyers are always more heavily armored than the more vulnerable turrets, and the 8 quad turbo laser turrets also aren't targetable. They don't constitute the bulk of the firepower. Most of the firepower is focused in the quad turbo lasers as well as the trench weapons. This is what you want to be using against ships, while the Victory is a very nice jack of all trades thing. Actually, that's a nice way to describe it. The Gladiator is the dedicated carrier. It's very much purposed for that. The Victory is generally a jack of all trades with the nice missiles that it has, which just make it useful. You not only get the heavy missiles, which barrage the enemy, which are useful against heavier ships, but you also get the longer range, smaller missiles. The Procrusator is, on the other hand, definitely a one-on-one ship combat, and it is a absolute beast. If you compare it with the Victory, it has almost, well, it actually has 50% more shield points, and it has a third more HP. That's very significant. Yeah, one-on-one ship combat, this ship is really second to none for its cost. The Procrusator only costs like 6,500, which for what it does for what it brings to the table in terms of warship is really, really powerful. It's absolutely useless against fighters, and if you have a decent bomber wave against it, you can take out the Procrusator fairly easily. Whereas the Victory and the Gladiator, by sheer virtue of their fighter garrison alone, will be able to strafe that off. The Procrusator has no fighters. So yeah, there is that. Then we're moving on to the Imperial 1. Now, I've made quite a bit of content regarding the Imperial 1 and Imperial 2, so at this point you should be familiar with the difference. The Imperial 2 has dual turbo lasers as the main batteries instead of the octuple turbo lasers. The Imperial 1 also has 6 laser cannons in its trench weapons, whereas the Imperial 2 has those replaced with turbo lasers. It also has a couple of ion cannons in the trench, just like the Imperial 2. But yeah, that is quite a significant difference. The Imperial 1 isn't necessarily worse than the Imperial 2, namely because the laser cannons are actually quite useful against fighters. Even though you're not going to be hitting a lot of them, every bit counts, especially on a ship like this, which basically has no defense against fighters whatsoever, except for a fuck ton of turbo lasers, which really aren't going to be hitting fighters anytime soon. 7,500 shield points and 20,000 hit points. Now the 20,000 hit points are very significant because that is a fuck ton of armor. It is a lot of armor. The Imperial class, of course, being 1,600 meters long, is definitely a floating fortress, and it does kind of have the firepower to boot. The Imperial ships have quite a few turrets all around it, and the difference between Imperial turrets and any other are that they are significantly slower firing, but they all have higher range. Which means that the turrets on the Imperial definitely outrange pretty much any other faction's weapons, but they don't necessarily have as much damage output. So even though the Star Destroyer is a very dangerous ship, obviously, if you get it up close to the enemy, it's actually kind of underwhelming, and it definitely relies on its robust amount of HP to keep it alive. The shields of the Imperial class, both 1 and 2, are really nothing to write home about. The MC-80, the MC-80, for example, has 15,000. The Imperial 2 only has 10,000. The Imperial 1 has even less, 7,500, which is half of an MC-80. But again, it does have all the armor to make up for that. Yeah, all that aside, I wouldn't say it has underwhelming firepower, but up close you really can get better for what you have, and you are definitely relying on the sheer amount of HP to carry your Star Destroyer through the fight if you are not engaging at long range. At long range, of course, you're going to absolutely smork everything else because it simply can't fire back, and due to these 6 dual turbo lasers and 2 dual ion cannons being the primary batteries. The overcharged primary battery ability on this ship basically gives all the long-range weapons, which are these 8 right to the side of the superstructure, which are the highest range weapons that it has, a tremendous firepower boost, which you'll have seen in the ship vs ship videos if you watch those. Which basically gives the ship a tremendous amount of burst damage, even though its regular firepower is not that insane. So yeah, high damage in burst and long range firepower and a fuck ton of HP. That's what this ship is. It carries 4 TIE Fighter squadrons in 3 waves, so 12 in total. You're paying 9,000 for this ship. Worth it, in my opinion. But not unbeatable in any way. Especially if you consider the price tag, and then considering that some of the other ships that really counter this quite nicely have oftentimes far lower price than that. So keep that in mind. And of course, bombers are always a great choice against capital ships. For a fraction of the cost, you can do a tremendous amount of damage to a ship like this using bombers. Imperial 2, I'm not going to cover too much because it's... do I still have the Conqueror files in here? Huh. Anyway, Imperial 2, more turbo lasers, less laser cannons. That's actually all there's to it. The trench laser cannons have been replaced by turbo lasers. The main batteries have been replaced from dual turbo lasers to octuple turbo lasers. So instead of firing 2 a shot, you're now firing 8 a shot. Which, as you might imagine, given that that gives them even longer range on these weapons, since range is kind of determined by how many shots you have per projectile, the octuple batteries are even longer range, and when you activate the overcharge ability on the primary batteries, you will obviously only get the octuple batteries, which fire faster. But since they're octuple, you're going to do so much burst damage that you can actually take out an MC-80's shields in like 1 overcharge if you're facing the ship. It's insane. The Imperial 2 is so powerful because of that. It has the price tag to boot, 25,000, no, 12,500 per Imperial 2. Yeah. The Imperial 1 had a bit of problems with firepower. The Imperial 2 mostly fixes that due to the added turbo lasers and the octuple turbo lasers instead of duals. Fighter garrison is not necessarily increased by that much. It still spawns just as many fighters, only this time it spawns interceptors instead of TIE fighters. Which the difference between the TIE fighters we'll get into later. There is a difference. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's significant enough to state. 10 population points for the Imperial 2 in comparison to the 8 population points for the Imperial 1. Absolute murder machine, floating fortress, amazing long-range burst damage with the overcharge ability. Very, very dangerous ship. The interdictor, I guess we'll cover the interdictor as well. Alright, it's called the Dominator in the files. Now the Interdictor Star Destroyer, or the Dominator, however you want to call it, takes everything you like about the Imperial Star Destroyer and removes it. But you do get a gravity well generator. That's basically all there is to that. You do get the trench weapons, which are quite significant. I think it has a little bit less HP. But since most of its HP is covered in the, or is comprised of the trench weapons, it still has most of that. It's obviously the trench weapons are still there. It doesn't have the octuple batteries, of course, and it doesn't have actually a lot of the weapons that the normal ISD has. This ship doesn't have. The ISD is filled with like miscellaneous, like dual turbo laser turrets, triple turbo laser turrets, quad turbo laser turrets, all over. This ship doesn't have that. So yeah, you're sacrificing like a good 80% of its firepower for the ability to have a gravity well. Which, by the way, the Sith Interdictor does for way cheaper. But this one you can build in more places, so 20 population points instead of 10, because I don't want you to spam interdictors. Also 20,000 build cost, because it's an advanced weapon. Oh, that brings us to the Allegiance. The Allegiance is one of the ships that has pretty much the most power to size value that you can get out of any starship. I'll cover that. I'll try to explain why that is. Not only do you get a ton of hard points that you have to destroy, you get 6 quad ion cannons on the trench, you get a bunch more trench weapons actually. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4? Just 4? Yeah. So you get 8 trench weapons as well, which again heavily armored. You get 3 single ion cannons, and then you get 12 quad turbo laser turrets. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what I want to say about the ship. The ship has 3 missile launchers, heavy missile launchers, 1 in the front, and then 1 on each side of the superstructure here. They're exceptionally low HP, like a single bomber run, a single bomber squadron bombing run, like a single volley of torpedoes will take out the missiles. And you really need to focus those down because they are really powerful. So yeah, missiles, turbo lasers, ion cannons. It has 32 quad turbo laser turrets, which are smaller. They're low range. They're just miscellaneous weapons around the superstructure. The overcharged primary battery only works on the quad turbo lasers, which surprisingly actually means they are less powerful than the barrage of the overcharged barrage of the Imperial Star Destroyer 2. Because the octuple weapons are generally fire more shots than the 12 quads, but these 12 quads are attached to this starship, and this starship is a fucking beast. Allegiance, stat-wise, it has the same shields as a MC-80, which you might not find very impressive, but it also has twice that in hit points, which is 1.5 times that of the Imperial Star Destroyer. You get all that in a ship that is 22 meters long, so even though it is about 50% larger than the Imperial Star Destroyer, you're also getting a fight. I need to think about what I want to say for a second instead of just spouting words. You get a ship that is the Imperial 2 Star Destroyer, which is 50% larger, but you also get 50% more shields, 50% more armor, and a ton more firepower. And missiles. Now all that does come at a little bit of a price tag. It does not have a fighter garrison, even though the fighter garrisons of the Imperial classes were already not much to write home about. The Allegiance doesn't have them at all. You get a population value of 20 because this ship is so powerful, and a price tag of 20,000, which it is worth. Star Destroyers of the, I think it is Imperial and up, can only be built on Kuat and Fondor right now. I'm considering adding Coruscant to that list, but if you want Star Destroyers built, you gotta do it on either Kuat, Fondor, or maybe later Coruscant. That's my way of kind of, I wouldn't say artificially limiting the amount of Star Destroyers you can build, but the AI does go a little bit crazy with these things, and if you have a fleet of, say, 10 Imperial 2s or like 5 Allegiances, that is just very, very powerful, and I don't want the AI to spam that. And since I spent so much time in making the lower size bracket of Imperial ships so useful, because these are still useful, even though these ships may be beasts, these ships are still very much useful and have a purpose. I don't want the AI to just spam capital ships, which is why I've limited all of this, and I don't want you to spam these ships either, so for that matter. So yeah, Allegiance basically can destroy what even the Imperial 2 can't. It's very durable, it's got a lot of firepower, long range as well. Again, Imperial ships have longer range turrets, they don't fire as quickly, but there is a fuck ton of them here. And, well, the long range really, really makes this just a beast. This really is one of the most powerful ships in the entire mod. Torpedo sphere. If you guys haven't seen... have I even made a video of the torpedo sphere? I don't think so. I think I've only uploaded screenshots, which is a shame because that ship really is best seen in action. That's Icon. Now the torpedo sphere has 188 torpedo launchers which it fires simultaneously at a player-directed target, and it wrecks basically everything under a... Yeah, I think an Imperial Star Destroyer barely survives the volley. Barely. Okay, so the torpedo sphere is a 2 kilometer long siege platform. It is very long range. It is pretty much completely defenseless in everything but its front. And if you do get in its front, it has these 188 torpedoes which it fires simultaneously. It only fires at player-directed targets. So if you don't want it to randomly fire, that won't happen, don't worry. It has a very high reload time, obviously. But you can basically wreck anything you want in a single shot. Unless we are targeting really large capital ships like Lucrehulks, in which case you will need 2 or 3 shots. The torpedo sphere is relatively durable. It's got 10,000 shield points and 25,000 HP. But don't let that fool you, even though it does spawn 8 TIE fighter squadrons for 3 waves. The build cost of this ship is 50,000 because it is a siege platform. It is very long range again. Long range. Keep this in the back. Don't send this to the front. Aside from the torpedoes, it has 4 quad turbo lasers around the torpedoes. The torpedoes are not targetable. Everything else is, which is basically because I don't want you to be able to take out the main feature of this ship so easily, which is the same reason why, for example, the Subjugator does not have its ion cannons targetable. It has a couple of hangars in the rear which are targetable. It has targetable engines, one of the few ships which has them. Also the reason why they are separate, so that once you blow them off, the engines stop glowing. There's a couple of laser cannons in the trench, but those are really just starfighter defense. Once you get on the side of this ship or behind it, you can just fire away, and there's nothing this thing can do about it. But again, that's not what it's for. You're supposed to keep it in the back so that the enemy can't flank it. You can very easily sit back with this thing and like 3 Star Destroyers around it, and then just have the Star Destroyers do nothing but guard the torpedo sphere, while the torpedo sphere like absolutely obliterates a starbase or something, and it'll stay well out of range, trust me. You don't have to stay in firing range of any enemy for the torpedo sphere to do its job. So yeah, that's a very dedicated siege platform. Another very dedicated ship of the Empire is the Titan Star Destroyer. The Titan is the only Star Destroyer with a cloaking device. It is 4 kilometers long, which makes it twice as long as the Allegiance. If you look closely at the ship in a previous release, you will note that the Titan Star Destroyer is basically comprised of the superstructure of the Allegiance, which you can still kind of see here, as well as the superstructure of the Imperial class, which you can kind of still see here, built on a much larger frame. Now the frame on the bottom does have quite a large hangar in which it stores quite a few TIE Phantom squadrons. TIE Phantoms we will go into later, very useful fighters in general. 30 population points, because it is quite a large ship of course. Spawns 12 TIE Phantom squadrons and it can do that trick 4 times. Costs 50,000. Why does it cost 50,000? If you look at its stats, it's really kind of underwhelming. 25,000 shields and 50,000 armor. If you compare that to the Allegiance, you will see immediately that this thing is not worth the cost. Adding to that, even though this ship does have a lot of the main armament of both the Imperial Star Destroyer as well as the Allegiance, which if you can see here, you can already see the fire mounts of, for example, the quad turbo laser turrets, and here the octuple turbo laser turrets, and here you can see the mounts for all of the Allegiance's quad turbo laser turrets. I mean the smaller ones, the untargetable ones. And for example the missiles and all that shit. This ship, for its size, does not have a lot of firepower. Which you may turn around and say, well, for example here are the allegiances, ion cannons. Different frame, but same ion cannons. Has a bunch of trench weapons as well. Yeah. Even though this ship does have a lot of the firepower of both the Imperial and the Allegiance, for its size, it's not that much. Which, as it turns out, size to firepower ratio, very important in how powerful a ship is. So, not only do we get a ship that health and shield wise doesn't cut it for the cost, but it's also firepower wise not nearly as impressive as the Imperial and the Allegiance class. So why is this costed so highly? Well, long story short, because this is a cloaking device. It's also the only ship in the mod which has 6 barreled turbo lasers, which are on this Star Destroyer very uncharacteristic of Star Destroyers, all sideways firing. They can't actually fire forward, they can only fire broadside. Still long range, and of course all the main weapons are still long range. But you're supposed to use this as a cloaking ship. That's also why it only carries TIE Phantoms, so that you can cloak everything that you bring in. As soon as you bring in this ship, you can cloak whatever it brings out. And then use it to your heart's content. Cloak lasts a very long time. You can position the ship anywhere on the map where you want, and safely move it over there with your cloak active, and then just deactivate it the moment you're ready to start barraging away. Even though technically this ship is not as powerful as the others. Size to firepower wise, of course. So yeah, you first have to complete the special weapons research, which is like a semi-6th tech level for the Empire, before you can actually build this. Because cloaking tech is quite powerful, obviously. Being able to simply cloak and then run away is quite powerful. That's all there's to that. The Annihilator, which in the mod is called the Purifier, because it uses the Purifier sound files from the Command and Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars Kane's Wrath expansion. Annihilator starts right. No. I've been talking so much I'm starting to lose my voice now. Anyway. The Annihilator is actually quite powerful, as you will know. It's got 3 super heavy turbo laser turrets on its top. It's got a ton more turbo laser and ion cannon turrets all over the ship. It also has 90 untargetable turbo laser weapon mounts, which are these small ships here. There's 90 of them all across the ship, which, looking closely, you may see them, well, basically everywhere. Yeah, this is basically the... it also has quite a few hangars. This is basically the battlecruiser of the Empire, which is the large ship before the truly large Star Dreadnoughts. Lot of HP, lot of shields, carries a lot of stuff. If you look at the fighter garrisons, for example, the Annihilator compared to the Executor and Eclipse, you may wonder why does this have so many fighters, which is basically as much as the Eclipse itself. Why is that? Well, basically because this ship has hangars all over the ship. Basically everywhere you look, it has hangars in some shape or another. And the ship was generally envisioned to have a large internal carrying capacity, so that's why it carries a lot of stuff. So here you have a ship that is large, it is high HP, it has a lot of firepower, it is long range, it is both long range and short range firepower, turreted weapons compared to, for example, the low range weapon mounts, and it has a ton of fighters, so why would you ever need to build anything else? Because this is the complete package. Long story short, you really don't, and that's also why it's got the nice price tag of 150,000 credits. And there's all there's to that ship. It's actually a relatively boring ship once you get to it, but it is incredibly powerful. Moving on. Well, then we get to the Star Dreadnoughts, don't we? Start with the Executor. I re-export the ship on a weekly basis because there is constantly stuff that I want to tweak on it. The latest iteration of the ship has blue lights and a slightly blue tint on the hull that may just as easily change. The Executor is a very, very, very large fucking ship. Now, we're talking about 19 kilometers. We are talking like 150 or so targetable turbo laser hardpoints. The ship can fire almost all the way across the map. Yeah. The ship is so large that its own size starts working against it, because if you remember what I said about hardpoint destruction, if this ship starts firing at something all the way across the map, it targets one hardpoint, and it needs to wait for all those projectiles to hit that target before it starts targeting another hardpoint. Which at long range is a serious fucking problem. It's not a problem against shields, because shields are just a single health pool, but against hardpoint it's a problem. That is where the second feature of the Executor comes in. Namely, once you actually get it in close and all these hardpoints start targeting other ships, because make no mistakes, like an MC-80 is like this large. So you can stack up a ton of ships on like any side of this one. Once you actually move this in between an enemy fleet and all these hardpoints start like targeting individual ships, this ship can like engage an entire fleet at once with all of its turbo lasers. And that's really where it shines. If it targets a single ship, then as I said, with the whole hardpoint destruction system and the way that works, you're gonna lose a lot of firepower and you're gonna lose a lot of time firing. But once you actually engage like 8 ships at once, that's not a problem, because you divide all that lost time by 8 and suddenly it's not so bad anymore. Yeah, very meticulously balanced this. I think this is the only way it can work. Currently it's got 100 pop value, it fills the entire thing. You get basically an entire fleet worth of starfighters with it. $400,000 credits built, 100,000 shield points, and 150,000 hit points. If you compare that, for example, an Imperial 1 or an Imperial 2, which has 10,000 shield points, and then you look at the Executor, but gee, that's just like 10 times as much. This ship is much larger than that. Why doesn't it have more shield points? Wouldn't that be more realistic? Yeah, but I'm also kind of making a mod here that still has to somewhat be balanced, and you have to be able to destroy the ship somehow. So concessions have to be made, and if we look at the hardpoint list of the Executor, then I will guarantee you that you will not be disappointed with the performance of this ship. Yeah, it's got a lot of stuff going on for it, and I don't think it disappoints in terms of performance, even though it may not be entirely realistic. That's all there is to the Executor. A fuck ton of targetable hardpoints. It has, I think, 6 shield generators, so you're not going to be targeting one shield generator and then boom, the whole thing's gone. No, you have one here, which is like in this forward bridge area. As you can see, there's a ton of deflector domes, along with some turbo laser towers. Here's one shield generator. There is 2 more on either side over here. So you got one there, and you got 3 more to the rear. One is, of course, the very famous bridge shield generator hardpoint, which is of course located over here on the tower. One more shield generator to the back over here, and then one more. Now these does have 2 shield domes on either side, but this is just one shield generator hardpoint. So 6 in total. It has firepower spread out all over the ship. It has turrets spread out, well, it doesn't have any turrets, but it does have turbo laser towers spread all over the surface of the ship, both on the top and the bottom. Anything on the top can target the bottom, and anything on the bottom cannot target the top. Which brings us to a real fucking problem, namely what happens if all the top weapons are gone and there's this one fucking MC-80 just pummeling away and it only has the bottom cannons left. Well, very simple, I made the ship rotate up and down. Voila. A lot of its firepower, however, is still concentrated on the superstructure. There is a, by the way, for each pair of 2 turbo laser towers, there is only 1 hardpoint. For example, this may have 2 fire bones, namely that one and that one, but it only has 1 hardpoint. So that's how that works. For example, that is 1 hardpoint. So you can see a ton of turrets here on the structure. They're not turrets, but towers. They're not entire towers. Sometimes it's just the top part. I played around a lot when I was building the ship with what would look best. Do we want just the large towers? Do we want a couple of smaller towers like that? What looks best? And basically for every emplacement you see on the ship, I tried both large and small towers to see what worked best. And eventually, once the ship was done, this came out of it, and I think this is the optimal visual representation with the towers. There's the nice trench here where the A-wing flew in when it got to the bridge and shit. What else do I want to say about the ship? Oh yeah, there's 12 heavy dual turbo laser turrets, which are basically the same as, for example, the ones that the Genovese has and that the Annihilator / Purifier has. Only, of course, on the Executor they are extremely long range, much like every other weapon. A lot of its firepower is based in and around the bridge. As you can see, everything leading up to the bridge is a weapon bank. Hardpoint, hardpoint, hardpoint. Another hardpoint in here. Then there's another hardpoint for these 2 down here. Of course, both sides, so you have that on 2 trenches. There are 4 dual heavy turbo laser turrets. Those are actually turreted on the side here, which is why you can't see them. Which are here, 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 and here, which are again concentrated around the bridge. There's a ton more weapon placements, which are again kind of trying to cover the bridge. A lot of the weapon placement is designed to cover the bridge because I felt that was very sensical and very logical, and I liked that, especially leading up to it frontally, so that you will most definitely be certain that if a Y-Wing squadron starts its attack run over here, it's not going to reach this area. So you don't have to worry about that. What else? Oh yeah, it has 40 untargetable heavy concussion missile launchers across the ship, across the superstructure, which are, they don't have specific texture, but they're these. Yeah, that really doesn't show it, does it? Let me try to find a better example. There are small chamfered boxes all around the superstructure, which are, for example, the texture on this thing is god-awful. Truly, I put all the work into the model and then hoped that the model would carry the god-awful texture that I put on it. But anyway, these chamfered boxes are missile launchers. There's 20 on each side. They're low range. Well, I mean, they were long range, but it had the same problem with the hardpoint destruction. And again, as I've explained countless times at this point, the moment the missiles fired, the turbo lasers were likely firing at the same target. And even the turbo lasers had the problem where there's a crap ton of turbo lasers coming in on an already dead hardpoint. Now imagine what a bunch of slow-moving missiles would do. That is why these are low range, so that they only fire at stuff that's actually going to be hit by the missiles and then take damage from the missiles. Thought about that one quite long and hard, but eventually I made it work. So yeah, 40 untargetable heavy missile launchers, a fuck ton of other weapons across the ship. The engines aren't currently targetable, mostly because to destroy these engines you'd have to destroy half the ship, which is of course dumb. I still want to replace the glowy bits on the hangars because it currently doesn't have any. I removed them because they look like shit. They need to be redone better. That's something for like edit number 586 on this ship, whenever that happens. Anyway, long story short, that's the Executor. It fills the entire pop cap. It's the only ship you need. It's vulnerable to bombers, even despite its 40 missile launchers. It's 800,000 turbo lasers, and it's like 80 million fucking TIE interceptors that it spawns. Vulnerable to bombers, as all things should be. Eclipse. The Eclipse is something fancy. Even though it's 1.5 kilometers shorter than the Executor, it's got this giant fucking super laser that goes all around the ship. The super laser does not one-shot the Executor, by design. I don't want you to one-shot any Star Dreadnought. Battle cruisers, maybe? I'm still conflicted about that one, by the way. For example, the Subjugator, it does not one-shot. Once the Bellator is in, which will be the Mandator, it will likely not one-shot that either, and it will absolutely not one-shot the Viscount. Why? Because I don't think that's fun. Long story short, I think it is important that even with a ship like this, you... Did I? No, this is still ambient light. The texture is just dark as fuck. Yeah, even though the Executor is the battleship Superstar Destroyer, which focuses on large-scale fleet engagements, the Eclipse is the single-target removal Superstar Destroyer that is very effective against a single target. And it is still effective against a single target, even though it doesn't one-shot them. Ships like the Lucrehulk basically go up in one shot, which is great. Anything else, anything smaller than that, obviously goes up in one shot. The... what I want to say... I've been talking for a long time now, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. Yeah. The Eclipse has enough regular weapons that it can still put a dent into pretty much any fleet that you throw against it, and since all the weapons are long range anyway, again, you're going to do a significant amount of damage against any fleet you go up against, but it does not have as much firepower as the Executor. What it does have, of course, is the super laser, which it can just fire at a large target, and then just do that 3 times, and anything you fired upon will be gone by then. This still gives large targets, like for example a Subjugator or a Viscount or a Executor, plenty of time to do a decent amount of damage against the Eclipse, as they should, because I don't want your Superstar Destroyer that you bought for like 400,000 credits to just disappear in the snap of a fingers. I don't think that's fun. Or interactive. I still want you to get the value out of that ship and do a good amount of damage if you go against even this ship, even though you are undoubtedly going to lose it. There is absolutely not a chance in tits that an Executor or a Viscount is going to take out an Eclipse. You're not even going to get halfway through the HP before the 3rd shot happens. But I do want you to do a bit of damage against it, so that you get a bit of value out of it. I think that's good balance, I think that's smart game design, and I'm sticking to it. And also just noticing that the gravity wells do not have the glowy bits. I'm not sure why. Problem for another time. Let's see. Stat-wise, the Eclipse has more HP than the Executor. A significant amount more, 100,000 more HP again. This is definitely the Star Destroyer that lasts the longest. It's got the same amount of shield points. It only has 2 shield hard points, which are located on its bridge. Let me see if I can... There's a lot of zooming that happens in and around the Superstar Destroyers. These are the mounts for the octuple turrets. Yeah, 1 shield hardpoint here, 1 shield hardpoint there. All hardpoints have quite a bit of health. Again, because this ship has a lot of health. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. It doesn't have as much straight up firepower as the Executor, not nearly as much actually. But it does have the single target removal super laser, which reloads like once every, what is it, like 45 seconds or something. So this thing is even more vulnerable to bombers than the Eclipse, or than the Executor is. But again, single targets, it is very good. Great terror weapon, very nice. Very decent fighter bomber garrison. You can actually use the Eclipse with a small escorting fleet, which you may want to use. It also costs 600,000 in comparison to the 400,000 of the Executor. But that's what that's just you're paying for the single target removal, and you're paying for the gargantuan amount of hit points that the ship has. Again, you can still take this out with bombers or like a fuck ton of frigates. The way this is balanced and the way the cost is balanced is so that for this cost, like 600,000, where's the MC30? Right there. You can build 150 MC30s to take out for the cost that it takes to take out one Eclipse, basically. Or you can build 100 MC30s for the cost that it takes out one Executor, which should be plenty for you to take it out cost effectively. Basically, the Superstar Destroyers are giant wastes of resources that you do not need to win a galactic conquest, but if you really want to, just like in regular Star Wars, if you really want to waste a bunch of cash on dumb shit, then you can definitely do that. You have that option. That's what the Superstar Destroyers are designed to do, and they do that very nicely. Alright, okay, so the ties are luckily fairly quickly. We are also going to go through them very quickly, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Though I will say, all the ties, glowy cockpit. Hell yeah. Useless shit I spent my time on. Anyway, TIE Fighter, very, very fragile, relatively large, so it's easy to hit, even though it's much easier to hit from the side than the front, let's be honest. It has 2 laser cannons, which, well, I mean, they're just 2 laser cannons, and that's it. It's got no shielding, it's not that fast. Actually, none of the TIEs are particularly fast, but they are very agile. Like, they turn very quickly, faster than any other craft. In general, the whole TIE series of fighter are very agile, even though they're not necessarily fast. TIE Fighter, of course, fragile, dies quickly, great if you use them in large numbers, because, of course, a laser bolt is a laser bolt, and if you hurl enough at them, if you hurl enough of them at the enemy fighters, they're still going to go down no matter how shit your fighters are. With that in mind, here's the TIE Interceptor, which hurt you like lasers, so it puts some more weaker lasers on the wingtips, so you can laser while you laser. It does still keep the chin-mounted laser cannons, but it has 4 low-range, low-damage, but very rapid-fire wingtip-mounted blasters, which are quite powerful. TIE Interceptor is slightly faster than the TIE Fighter. Yeah, again, it's not that much faster, but it's a little bit. It is slightly more maneuverable as well. It's got like 5 more hit points, which again, in a head-on engagement, that's not going to help you much, but you know, it's any little bit counts when you've got shit for health to start with. So yeah, TIE Interceptor, better than the TIE Fighter. More damage, a little bit more HP, speed, and agility, but the only thing that really matters is the added firepower and the added, you know, the wingtip blasters. That's what you need to take away from this. Coming up on that, the very much logical evolution of the TIE Interceptor is the TIE Phantom. Now you may ask, what the fuck does the Phantom have to do with the Interceptor? It's very simple. The Phantom is... Oh, no, other way around. The Phantom is everything the Interceptor wishes it could be. We not only have a TIE with a hyperdrive, but we also have a TIE which, while it does sacrifice the speed of the Interceptor, it's just regular TIE fighter speed and regular TIE fighter agility. It does have the armor of the Interceptor, but not just that, it has shields, like actual shield points, and it's not no shit shields either. These are the same shields that, for example, the X-Wing uses, which are very decent. Star Viper is the same. Just very good in general, because, well, fucking shields, but not just that, it has, instead of 2 wingtip mounted, it has, or 2 chin mounted, it has 3 main laser cannons. So the main weapon of the Phantom is 50% more powerful than that of the standard TIEs, and it does still have the 3 wingtip mounted blasters. So not only do you have a craft that's just generally better in, well, firepower, because these lasers are more powerful than the wingtip mounted blasters, and they're also longer range because these wingtip mounted blasters don't have shit for range. It also has an actual shield generator, which is great. And to top it off, it also has the cloaking field. So if you really feel like microing some fighters, you can do so with the TIE Phantom. Basically, the Phantom I very intentionally made not exceptionally costly. They cost about twice as much as a TIE Interceptor Squadron would cost, which doesn't normally matter except in skirmish, but whatever. Basically, you get a better fighter. It's as simple as that. You get shields, you get better weapons, you get better durability, and you get the cloak. It's the tier 3 fighter for the Empire. This is the logical evolution of the TIE Interceptor, and if you can, at some point, you want to replace your TIE Interceptors with your TIE Phantoms. The only downside is you don't get these out of carriers, you have to actually build them. But they are generally worth it. Quick comparison between the Phantom and the X-Wing. The X-Wing has the mini torpedo, the Phantom does not. The Phantom has a lot more fighter-to-fighter firepower in the wingtip mounted blasters though. It has like a tiny bit less armor, but that's not really a big deal. Same speed. Agility is severely increased because, well, the TIEs in general just turn very quickly and things like the X-Wing simply don't. Don't mind any of these stats, by the way. This is pure bullshit. Deception. Lies. Deception. And in general, the TIE Phantom is it actually cheaper than the X-Wing? No, it's actually the same cost. Okay. So yeah, if you want a sturdy fighter for the Empire, get Phantoms, which are also locked behind the semi-tech 6 special weapons research. So definitely go grab that. If you want sturdy fights as the Empire, you have it in the Phantom. The TIE Vanguard, which is basically the TIE Scout, is simply a TIE fighter, only with a gargantuan side range and a ping ability, which lets you reveal the map. It is useful for scouting. Not all ships have a very high visibility range. I make a point out of setting ship visibility at least as high as their fire range, but in case you want to see further, the TIE Vanguard can easily help you with that. Which is also why, for example, a ship like the Vigil, which is a Corvette hunter, has them, so it can better hunt enemy Corvettes and chase them down. Yeah, let's start on the bomber line. The TIE Bomber has a little bit more HP than the TIE Fighter, but it's still very fragile. The TIE Bomber itself, again, no shields. It has just not even 30 HP. It does have the chin-mounted laser cannon, and even though it is still more agile than the X-Wing, it is also significantly slower. Again, remember that the whole twin ion engine system that the Empire uses is not necessarily faster, it's just more agile. So yeah, very little HP still, but it does have both the lasers. It has a proton torpedo launcher for anti-capital ship warfare, or just fighters or frigates or whatever. No, not fighters. Frigates and capital ships and corvettes. But it does have also a anti-fighter missile that it can use against fighters. So you not only get the chin-mounted lasers, you can also fire the anti-fighter thing from the pod, which, as you remember, is not very effective, but it's just a nice something. But in general, these just go down very, very quickly. Still, they're very cheap. And deployed in large number, they can still be cost effective because of that, in good old Empire style. Which brings us to the very much not cheap fighters that the Empire has, which is the TIE Hunter and the TIE Defender. Now these are kind of the same craft, somewhat, but there are a couple of differences. Namely, the TIE Hunter is significantly cheaper than the TIE Defender. If you look at the build costs, you can actually build the TIE Hunter. It has a hyperdrive, you can hyperspace it in. It is very powerful. We are talking about a TIE here with shields. An even higher speed than the Interceptor and about the same rate of turn. Agility, again, it's important. But also the TIE Hunter has ion cannons and it has 2 torpedoes instead of the 1 that the TIE Bomber has. So not only is this twice as effective in terms of shield penetrating weapons, it also has the ion cannons, which it can use both against ships and against fighters, and on top of that it also has the lock as false ability, which makes it extraordinarily small and very difficult to hit. Like even fighter missiles have difficulty hitting this once in lock as false mode. So yeah, you get a fast ship, which is pretty good against, because it also of course has the chin laser cannons. No wingtip mounted blasters, but it doesn't need them. Well, it could use them, but whatever. So yeah, fast, very agile, very fast actually. 2 torpedoes per shot, it has the ion cannons and it has the chin-mounted laser cannons. This is why the ship is as expensive as a B-Wing, because it is just good for basically whatever you use it for. Now if you thought that was good and powerful and a very sturdy fighter, you are absolutely right, but then I present to you the TIE Defender, which is even better. TIE Defender really is one of the most powerful craft in the entire mod. And not just because it has the fancy glowing cockpit that all the other TIEs have, but because it has even more weapons. It not only has the chin-mounted laser cannons that all the TIEs have, but it also has the 4 wingtip-mounted blasters that the Interceptor has. And on top of that, it has 2 ion cannons over here that also the TIE Hunter has. And like the TIE Hunter, it also has 2 proton torpedo launchers, and it has 2 anti-fighter missile launchers like the A-Wing has. This thing is everything you want in a starfighter. It is very fast, like exceptionally fast. It is the fastest fighter available in the mod. It is the most agile starfighter available in the mod. It has the full 50 shield points that any high tier craft has in the mod, which is actually in according to canon, sort of as well. Of course, hit points it doesn't have any because it's a TIE, but that's not a problem because it does everything else. If you are hit with this ship, you got the shields, which regenerate fast, remember. It's an active barrier now, it regenerates very quickly. Your shield can soak up the damage. You've got the speed and agility to outmaneuver or outrun any fight you cannot win. And once you do decide to engage, you've got such a plethora of weapons to attack with that both Starfighter and Starship doesn't stand a chance. And it also has an overcharge ion cannon ability, which disables all the laser weaponry and makes the ion cannons fire very heavy ion cannon shots, which will drain shields of even capital ships. Not out of a single Defender squadron, but if you have 2, you will basically take down the shields in a single strafe or 2 with the overcharge active. You won't be able to fire at anything else. You won't be able to fire anything else except for the torpedoes and the ion cannons. But if you want to attack capital ships, then that's the mode you want to do it in. And if you want to use if you want to engage starfighters, just be sure not to switch that on, because it is the weapon switch ability. You can simply not switch it on, and the AI won't do it for you. The AI will not fuck up your defenders for you. And then just right-click the enemy fighter squadrons and just see them disappear. This ship is everything you want, basically, in a starfighter. Shields, speed, a fuck ton of weapons and firepower. But it has no armor to speak of. If this is hit by a concussion missile, it's RIP. Likewise, if it's hit by a diamond boron missile, then it's RIP, but any starfighter hit by a diamond boron missile is RIP. Advantage, of course, being you don't generally see diamond boron missiles because they're expensive as fuck. Concussion missiles are a lot more common, but those generally have to actually hit the TIE Interceptor, or the TIE Defender to do the damage. So there's that. And the Diamond Boron missile does splash, which doesn't have to hit at all. It just hits like there, and you still lose your TIE Defenders. They are exceptionally expensive. They are the most expensive by far fighter craft in the entire mod, at a grand total of 2,550. For that cost you can get corvettes for a single squadron of TIE Defenders. But once you do get them, oh boy can they be powerful. Absolutely wonderful. They're also not garrison starfighters in anything except for the Superstar Destroyers, because that would be exceptionally OP. Yeah, they're lovely. I love them. And I'm getting tired, and we still have to go through the Underworld faction. Luckily, those don't have a lot of ships. Chat at this point, I don't even know how much I missed. So, same as with the other few times, I will quickly go through chat and answer any questions that you may have. So, if you're hearing this, then type your questions in the chat right now, and I will answer them when I get to the bottom of the chat. How are you doing with the start? Right, I already answered that. That'll be another build stream. Doing well. I've placed blisters over it. Try to make that work. That's still in development. It's kind of like how I place the weapon towers on the Executor. It's a lot of trying to see what looks best. Greetings, welcome to the stream, man. Our point is that it's conflicts, right? Is that Storm Commander ship? Yep, it is. The Imperial Escort Carrier is. But space is too dark, I keep hearing people say. If you want a bright mod to play, go play like FAOC Alliance or something, where the ambient light settings are set to like 100 instead of 5, which it should be. Oh yeah, there are definitely a couple of very bright maps in the mod. In the new release, you'll see. Will you make a Scarif map? Nah, probably not. And besides, that would just be the same as another map, which is like planet, starbase over it, and all the starbases right now are the shield gates, so that's about that. No, I do make maps. I don't make ground maps. I can, I've done it in the past, but I don't do it for Remake, because it takes a long time. And I'm already quite busy with making space maps. That already takes me long enough with the Death Star positions. Torpedo sphere is weird. Yep, it is. Probably make a vid for the yeah, definitely. I think I remember watching a vid with the torpedo sphere in it. I don't think so, but maybe. How the Viscount will look. Viscount won't have visible turrets at all, but it will have textures. Because all ships need textures. Will the AI be able to use upgrades like weapon upgrades, reinforcement, reinforced plating, that sort of stuff? I have no idea if they actually do. In the skirmish tests that I did, they actually didn't, but I may try to mess around with the scripts a little bit to see if I can make that work. No questions for now. Okay, then we're gonna very quickly go through the underworld units, because I am getting a little tired there, as you may understand. Crusader gunship and Cadalbay are actually neutrally buildable on Mandalore. You're just seeing them sit on this list since I didn't move them from like here to like here to the rest of the Mandalorian units. The Basilic War Droid still has to be coded in. Again, I'm falling over my words, probably because I've been talking for like, I don't know how long at this point. The Crusader gunship was one of the most notoriously overpowered craft in all of Vanilla Forces of Corruption, and that's impressive because Vanilla Forces of Corruption had some exceptionally overpowered starships like you wouldn't believe, but my god. The Crusader was one of the worst offenders. In the mod, the Crusader is still a powerful gunship, but it has been balanced. How so? Well, it's no longer fucking retarded in its cost. The Crusader has several laser cannons, it has 3 dual turbo lasers, and I don't think it currently has the point defense ability. We may have enabled that again, but I'm not sure. We may have. Generally, it is just a very solid, neutrally buildable corvette on Mandalore, that if you do have Mandalore, you want to consider building this. Simply because it's a Mandalorian ship, or simply because it's a Mandalorian ship, and Mandalorian ships in general are amazing. Crusader, 1500 shield points, 1500 health points, 1000 build, yeah, no. Fast, of course, it's a Corvette. I mean, what else do you want to say? These are a bunch of turrets, that's the battleship, we don't want to start on that yet. Actually, let's do so, it's a Mandalorian unit as well. The Cadal Bay battleship. Now this has been featured in several videos. I absolutely love this ship. This is one of the few models and textures that is old. One of the few models and textures that I made that are at this point years and years old, but that I do not absolutely hate. I actually, despite the fact that this ship uses overlapping UVs, it uses it has no ambient occlusion map. It has textures that were made in Photoshop ages ago, but I don't actually hate it because I think that the texture is good enough, which is surprising because normally I hate my old work, but this is fairly good. Cadal Bay battleship is one of the modern Mandalorian ships, which means it's even more overpowered than the old Mandalorian ships. It's got a ton of armor, it's got, decent shields. I mean, the focus of the Mandalorians isn't shields, it is pure straight up firepower and armor. Oh, never mind, it's also got decent shields. It's got shields that are stronger than that of the Imperial Star Destroyer 2, and it's got health which rivals the Imperial Star Destroyer 2. Plop on that the ridiculous amount of firepower that this has in terms of laser cannons, turbo lasers, ion cannons, and of course the gargantuan mass drivers. Not just the 6 heavy mass drivers in the front here, that of course penetrate weapons and do splash damage, but the giant mass drivers here. They do so much damage, and they are so long range. The ship is so bad, it's just... When I said that the Allegiance was one of the highest power to size ratios you could get of any ship in the mod, one of the best, this is the other one. This is the other contender for number 1. It is just so good. And it doesn't even have a special ability, because it doesn't need any. Now imagine with a dumb shield leash ability back on from vanilla. That's not going to happen, of course. Anyway, 15k for this ship. You're going to be paying it, and you're going to be loving every second of it, because this ship is worth it in every possible way. It is what you want. Consortium Recison? Oh right, that's the Recison 2. The Consortium has a... Remember when I talked about the Underworld having 3 factions, the Huts, the Black Sun, and the Consortium. The Consortium likes to construct the super crazy and powerful ships. One of them is the Recison 2. Basically, they took the CIS Recison and they kept developing it further. I should have the show variant here as well. Yeah, show. That doesn't have the engines blown off. Or, well, engine. The way I try to distinguish the Recison 1 from the Recison 2 is not only by removing most of its superstructure on top, so that you very clearly get to see just the armor, but I remove 2 of the engines here. In lore, I just say, well, this ship has diamond boron missiles, so everything else was removed to cut down on cost. The forward fixed dual heavy turbo laser was replaced by a rotating, this thing can actually rotate, mass driver, which is like the Cadalbe heavy mass driver. So that's beast. What's beast as well is the diamond boron missiles. This thing launches diamond boron missiles. Yeah, it's one of those ships. It's a ship that's not a corvette, which has diamond boron missiles, and they're not targetable. It's powerful. It's actually kind of insanely powerful, which is also why it has the price tag to boot of 20,000 credits. Have fun with that. It's fragile, it is exceptionally slow, much slower than the original Recusant. But since this is designed as a long-range siege platform, much like the torpedo sphere, thanks to the diamond boron missiles, this ship is definitely worth it. Oh god, the Valiant, man. This thing, someone needs to remake this ship. That was not my best work. Neither is this, by the way, the Vengeance. I kind of liked it simply because it's kind of like interesting with its like superstructure and all these weird shapes and the rotating Gatling cannons and stuff. Like, I mean, that's sort of interesting, but the execution is really kind of poor. I still want to remove the Vengeance. It's actually still on the chopping block. It's not removed just yet, but it will be soon. Well, the Interceptors 4 and 5 are... Do we have those here? No, I don't think I actually have that model. No, I don't. So I guess I'll just talk about them like this. The Interceptor 4 is basically the good old Interceptor that you know and love. It has turbo lasers. It has the... I think it has missiles. Or did it have torpedoes? It either has missiles or torpedoes in its front. It's very small. It is no longer 3 targetable hardpoints. It is a single small corvette, as it was in canon. Which is just like the CR-90 or the DP-20 or the Crusader, just a single targetable ship. Now, the difference between the Crusader and the Interceptor 4 is that while the Crusader it does have the 3 dual turbo laser turrets, it's mainly a fighter screener. And it just has the turbo lasers for fire support. The Interceptor 4 is purely built for fire support against larger ships. It doesn't have any laser cannons, but the turbo lasers do fire quite fast, and the torpedoes are, of course, well, they're torpedoes, they're useful against large ships. That's what they do. 2 population points per, you can spam the shit out of them. They also cost only 1,000, so again, feel free to spam the shit out of them. In large numbers, these are actually really annoying. The Interceptor 5 is even worse. The Interceptor 5 basically has a couple more shield points, and it also has a increased build cost because the either missile or torpedo of the Interceptor 4 has been replaced by the heavy proton torpedo launcher that, for example, the MC-30 uses. Yeah, so that's even more fire support. Again, it's a small ship. It's not... I mean, it is fast, it's not as durable as the MC-30, and it's also not as powerful as the MC-30, but it can really, with its turbo lasers and its new heavy torpedoes, still put a dent in larger ships, which, of course, in larger numbers it is supposed to do. Purely fire support against larger ships, while the Crusader is purely a... well, it's more meant for fighter screening. The Recusant 2, we discussed the Cadalba, we discussed the Vengeance on the chopping block, the Crate Destroyer, aka the Aggressor Destroyer. In-game is still the good old ship with 2 turbo lasers and a very large ion cannon and a very large plasma cannon that does splash damage. It fires significantly faster. It only costs 8,000, which may surprise you. That's actually very low. The Imperial 1 is 9,000 by comparison. And the reason for this relatively low build cost is that due to the way the hardpoint system now works, and because I haven't given it quite enough splash damage to shed, I think, the crate blasts are still powerful and they generally do one-shot hardpoints, but in the mod, as you may know, there's quite a lot of hardpoints to chew through. So if you have a crate destroyer against an Imperial Star Destroyer, for example, you're gonna have to fire quite a few times to get through that thing. So that's the reason for the cost decrease there. It's still good. It's still powerful. It's not as powerful as it used to be in Vanilla Empire at War, simply because there are more hardpoints now than there were back then. But it's still quite around the same power level, even though it does fire a bit faster, and the cost has been reduced to compensate for its lower overall value compared to large capital ships. The Crate Destroyer, again, is generally a consortium ship, so they do like their heavy firepower ships. The Requisite 2, the Crate Destroyer, you name it. Large unorthodox weapons. Also, the Vengeance used to be that, but again, that's getting cut. That brings us to the Underworld fighter roster, which is actually quite interesting. I don't have the model for the Star Viper and the Skip Ray here, so I'll just go over them quickly. The Star Viper is a very versatile fighter craft. It's basically it's kind of akin to the X-Wing. It has slightly more armor than the X-Wing, and it definitely has a bit more speed. Speed is on par with the TIE Interceptor. The Star Viper does have its dual laser cannons, which are nice. It also fires a small torpedo, but it doesn't have the, and with small torpedo I mean the mini torpedo that the X-Wing also fires, but it doesn't have the lock as-false ability. So in general it's slightly better. It's also slightly more maneuverable than the X-Wing, but that's not really much to write home about. Fast, sturdy, shielded, a nice starfighter. And it does not have those bullshit off-powered bus droids. The Skip Ray is kind of a special case. The Skip Ray is one of those ships, or one of those fighters that are actually huge. As in, that thing is 30 meters long, man. That's easy to hit. And that's a problem, because easy to hit in this mod for fighters means they're going to go down fairly quickly. Now luckily, the Skip Ray is equipped with quite a decent shield generator, especially for its cost, as well as a lot of armor. It's basically the B-Wing equivalent in terms of health, only it does it for a slightly bit less cost. It's also extremely slow. It's, I think, the slowest thing in the mod. Here in the spreadsheet, of course, but the spreadsheet is outdated, it says that the TIE Bomber is the same cost, or the same speed. I think the Skip Ray may actually be slightly slower than that. It turns like a brick. It's absolutely terrible at that. It's large, it's slow, and it doesn't turn fast. Well, that basically means it's going to get hit a lot, and, well, that's really where you need the shields for. Luckily, it does have them. Aside from that, it also has two forward-facing laser cannons. It also has two forward-facing ion cannons, and it fires two torpedoes. So it is quite the heavy bomber, because if you look at, for example, the B-Wing, that has a small laser cannon, it has a large laser cannon, and the two ion cannons, and it also fires two torpedoes. But that's like a high-end bomber. The high-end bomber, the B-Wing specifically, costs $750. The Skip Ray is a little bit less, because it is supposed to be the cough basic bomber unit, cough of the Underworld, even though it does fire two torpedoes at the time. And normally the bomber craft only fire one for the basic ones, and you need the advanced bomber craft to fire two. But since the Underworld doesn't really have a dedicated light bomber craft that they use, mostly because they're supposed to scavenge a lot of their fleet from, for example, CIS and Republic units. Also, the starting zone of the criminal underworld is very close to a lot of worlds that have that are capable of building Republic and CIS units. You aren't really supposed to be relying on ships like the Skip Ray or the Star Viper to be the meat of your army. Which is why I was comfortable with giving the Skip Ray the dual torpedo payload. Oh, and the Skip Ray also has two, or I think it is one anti-fighter missile launcher, so you can add that on top of what it already has, and you can see why it's quite a powerful bomber, even though it is slow as shit and easy to hit. I think that concludes our talk. God damn, this stream was... When I started this, I thought, you know what, we'll do this quick in 30 minutes and we'll be done with it. I'm quickly going over the files to see if anything has been missed. let's see. Cover that. That's not ready yet. That's part of the Black Sun roster. I could go through the Vong units, but they haven't been balanced to the remake method of gameplay yet, so that still has to happen. Once that's done, undoubtedly you'll see videos of the Vong pop up. Don't worry about that. So that's ready. You see, yeah, that we went through. We went through all of that as well. Then Evelyn the Quasar, Rebel Starfighters. Then you get the Vong, and that should be it, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have concluded our unit overview. My God, that took a while, guys. Let's see. Special in skirmish. Is there gonna be the missile boat? The fighter? No, there's not going to be a missile boat. Alright, so I'm gonna do one last round of questions. If anyone has any questions, post them in the chat and I will get to them. As soon as chat catches up, of course, while I close all of this. Wow, that took a while. Damn. No more questions. Then, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be calling it here. I'm going to upload this VOD to YouTube so that other people who may be interested in watching this very lengthy unit overview video have the chance to do so. My voice is absolutely shot. I may not sound like it, but my throat hurts like hell right now from 2.5 hours or so of just straight talking. And well, I mean, that's where I ended. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I definitely did. I've been talking a lot about something that I'm passionate about, and I hope that's visible. Shameless shill at the end of the stream. If you do like what you're seeing here and you like the mod in general so far, please consider supporting on Patreon. That is how I support myself while modding, and if not for the Patreon page, at this point the remake mod would be dead because I'd have to find a job. And I very much prefer to keep modding instead of having to find that job and stocking shelves or some shit. So yeah, the Patreon page is simply patreon.com/Geronimo with a J. Yeah, if you want to see more of this stuff, then please consider supporting. For now, I wish you all a very good afternoon and a very good Sunday. And I hope to see you next time in the next video. Ladies and gentlemen, bye bye.